I'd like to call this meeting to order. The time is 9:13, and today is Wednesday, September 21st, 2022. This is a two-day meeting of the Physical Therapy Board of California, and today we're meeting at San Diego Mesa College, located in San Diego, California, and we are in room MC211A. May I please have roll call?
Alicia Benet-Ahmed.
Here.
Tanya McMillian.
Here.
Dale Armstrong. Here. Jesus Dominguez.
Present.
Daniel Drummer.
Present.
Katerina Alabi.
Present.
Jonathan Irvin.
Present.
All members are present and the board has a quorum.
Thank you. And if we could have Mr. Jonathan Irvin please read our board's mission statement.
Our mission statement is to advance and protect the interests of the people of California by the effective administration of the Physical Therapy Practice Act.
Thank you. And before we get into agenda item number 4, special order of business, I would like to just say this is an official business meeting of the Physical Therapy Board, and the board's role remains to maintain consumer protection and consult with local and state entities on the laws and regulations pertaining to the physical therapy industry. We'll take public comment on specific agenda items, and at both the beginning and end of the meeting, there'll be a comment session for items not on the agenda. Public comments must be specific to the agenda item that's being discussed. If you make a comment during a specific agenda item that's not related to that topic, you'll be directed to hold your comments until we reach the appropriate agenda item. All comments that do not directly relate to an item on the agenda should be held until the agenda item for items not on the agenda is held. The board follows the Open Meeting Act, so while we accept and appreciate the public's comments, we cannot respond to those comments. I'd just like to say before we get into agenda item 4, welcome to everyone in person. Welcome to board members, staff, and all stakeholders present. It's been almost a year since our last in-person meeting, so it's nice to be back in person, and especially with a full quorum. That's wonderful. So thank you all for being here, and we'll move right into agenda item number 4 with Judge Jamie Teagle-Burgos taking the lead.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. I'm Administrative Law Judge Jamie Teagle-Burgos, and I work with the Office of Administrative Hearings, and I've been assigned to sit with the board on this matter. Before we proceed with the hearing, I just have some housekeeping to take care of. I know there was just a roll call taken with the board members, but I would like to just go through and make sure I printed a copy of your photo. So I want to make sure I know who is who here. Okay, great. Is Rabina Amen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Ms. Tanya McMillian. Good morning. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. Dale Armstrong. Oh, thank you. Daniel Drummer.
Good morning.
Right next to me. Good morning.
That's so I begin.
Jesus Dominguez. Good morning. Jonathan Irvin. Yes, thank you. You read that mission statement very well. Katerina Alabi. Okay, great. That's everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. Am I missing?
This is Council
Council.
Michael Canotes.
Yes,
board legal
you
counsel,
are right
Michael
here. I had your name. Let me see. What's your name one more time?
Michael Canotes.
Okay. Oh, you're right here. Right there. Okay, here we go. just have to make sure of everyone, I know who is here. Thank you. Council. Okay, great. So I'd like to speak to the procedure today and the process and the order of how the hearing will go. And I know that, Mr. Jones, you are here today representing yourself.
Yes, Judge.
Okay, great. So I can't give any legal advice, of course, but I think it's really important that everyone understands the process of the hearings, and these administrative hearings, they're all kind of the same. They're really simple as far as the process and what we're going to do today. We're here with the board today. So after I speak with you directly, I'll turn to the Deputy Attorney General, and I'll speak with him. Well, he'll speak to us, actually, Mr. Davis, about the exhibits. We'll go through the exhibits, and I'll mark them, and we can move to admit them into the record. And what that means, just kind of in a fancy way, is that they're in a binder right now, but I have to officially give them a number or a letter, each exhibit or document, and then we will move to admit them into the record officially, which means they're kind of floating out there still, and I have to officially bring them into the record. And you can object to them being in the record, and then I would, if there are any objections, I will make a ruling on the objection, okay? And then after we do that, we'll go ahead and we'll get a summary of the case from Mr. Davis, and then after we have the summary, what we'll do is we will move into the meat of the hearing. And it's kind of like a sandwich. There's that top piece of bread, that's that intro stuff I just talked about, and then there's the middle part, and then there's the bottom part. And the middle part is when you present your case, okay? And we call that your argument or your case in chief. And so you're the petitioner, and so you'll be presenting your argument, okay? And you can offer testimony, give your testimony, other witness testimony, and the board members and the Deputy Attorney General, Mr. Davis, will have an opportunity to ask questions of you, okay, if they have any. And then when we're done with that part of the hearing, you can offer, the petitioner, you can offer a closing argument. Mr. Davis can as well. And then we will go into closed session, okay? So that's the order. And if you have any questions along the way, just let me know, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay. So with that said, okay. The record is now open in the matter of the petition for the reduction of penalty, specifically the termination of probation, filed by the petitioner Ryan Eric Jones, PT. This bears OAH case number 2022-050-435, agency case number 720-2017-001117. Today's date is September 21st, 2022. And this hearing is being held in person today at Mesa Community College. My name is Administrative Law Judge Jamie Teagle Burgos. As I said before, I work for the Office of Administrative Hearings for the state of California, and I've been assigned to sit with the Physical Therapy Board of California, which is convened here today to consider your petition. I'd like to get appearances for the record. First, for the Attorney General's office.
Good morning, Your Honor, Madam President, members of the board. My name is Matthew Davis. I'm Supervising Deputy Attorney General in the Health Quality and Enforcement Section of the Attorney General's Office, and I'm appearing here today pursuant to Government Code 11522 on behalf of the Attorney General. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Jones, you can introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Ryan Eric Jones, PT license number 34317, and I'm representing myself today in front of the board and the administrative law judge and Mr. Davis.
Good morning, Mr. Jones. Thank you. Okay. So let's turn to the exhibits. Mr. Davis?
Yes, Your Honor, we compiled although Mr. Jones has the burden here, we did compile an exhibit binder containing all the exhibits that we felt relevant to the board's determination of this petition. Do you want me to identify each by name? Your Honor?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Exhibit number 1 is the notice of hearing, which put Mr. Jones on notice of today's hearing. He's here, so he knew about it, obviously. Exhibit 2 is the petition itself for early termination probation. Exhibit 3 is Mr. Jones' written narrative that accompanies that petition. Exhibit 4 is Mr. Jones' probation monitor report, partially redacted. Exhibit 5 is the underlying accusation that led to the disciplinary action in this case. Number 6 is the stipulated settlement and order that is at issue today and whether it should be shortened or terminated. Exhibit 7 is petitioner's continuing education certificates. Exhibit 8 are petitioner's letters of support from colleagues. Exhibit 9 is a copy of the Code of Regulations, as is Exhibit 10, which kind of demarcate the inquiry this board will engage in determining whether this termination is appropriate or not. It's a kind of a step-by-step roadmap of the factors you should consider. Exhibit 11 is a copy of the California Business and Professions Code 2661.7, which speaks to a licensee's ability to petition for early termination of their probation. Exhibit 12 is Mr. Jones' certificate of licensure. Exhibit 13 is a letter from Mr. Jones to this board regarding his 2007 DUI conviction. Exhibit 14 is a letter from Mr. Jones to this board regarding his 2017 DUI conviction. Exhibit 15 is a letter from Mr. Jones to this board regarding his 2019 DV arrest and subsequent conviction. Exhibit 16 is the LA Sheriff's Department incident report. That one is regarding the domestic violence case. Exhibit 17 is the Claremont Police Department incident report for the 2017 DUI arrest. And finally, Exhibit 18 is a clinical diagnostic evaluation that was completed by Maximus and that was a required term of the underlying probation in this case.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I'm going to have a question for you.
Yes.
Can your office send these to in electronic format to OAH as separate exhibits? That way I can upload them officially. I can mark them in Adobe and stamp them in Adobe. And we'll have an electronic record on our end. Thank you. You can, yes,
There's personal information on Exhibit 16 and 17. I think that should be redacted.
thank
As
you.
personal addresses.
Thank you very much.
That is always an open option if there is anything in here that is personally identifying. That can be filed under seal as well, Your Honor.
Yeah, I can act, thank you.
And we'd probably enter into a joint request.
Yes, exhibits, did you say 15 and 16? Thank you. I can place 16 and 17 under seal.
Perhaps 18 too, if it becomes, a public record, that becomes a diagnostic.
Yes, oh, yes, thank you. Let me just,
And anything else that, we have no objection to sealing the full record now.
why don't I just seal the whole record? One moment. Okay. So your office will send OAH the 18 exhibits separately, as separate Adobe, and separate Adobe files. You can upload them right into,
The e-filing system?
yeah, that's fine. Thank you. And let's see, today's Wednesday, COB tomorrow, Thursday or Friday? How much time?
I can't speak for staff, but can we have till Friday night?
Certainly. Okay, COB Friday. The 23rd. Okay. Great, thank you. We're still on housekeeping, so exhibits 1 through 18 are marked. Mr. Jones, do you have any objections to any of the exhibits being entered into the record?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So there are no objections, so exhibits 1 through 18 are admitted into the record. And as I said before, the entire record will be sealed. And I'll issue a sealing order doing that. Okay, great. Mr. Davis, is there any other housekeeping that you're aware of? Okay, thank you. Okay, great. Just going to keep this on my lap here. So now we're going to turn it over to Mr. Jones, okay? Actually, I'm sorry. I apologize. We're still at Mr. Davis for the summary. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, petitioner has a serious disciplinary history with the board, beginning with this board's decision and order dated November 12, 2019 in the underlying administrative case, placing petitioner on guideline minimum probation for 5 years on various terms and conditions. This decision and order resolved an amended accusation that alleged several bases for discipline, including convictions of crimes substantially related to the practice, habitual intemperance, general unprofessional conduct, and use of alcohol to an extent to be a danger to himself or others. Petitioner has multiple serious criminal violations related to his use of alcohol. The two most recent being the 2017 DUI, where he registered a blood alcohol content of 0.19, nearly 2.5 times the legal limit, 1 hour and a half after driving. And the domestic violence conviction, where reportedly in a drunken rage, he came home on Christmas Eve upset about his cell phone not working and violently attacked his wife while holding his 2-year-old daughter, injuring his 2-year-old daughter in the process, and then turning his violent attack on his own mother and slapping her in the face between 6 and 10 times. He, to his credit, and reportedly stopped drinking that night and enrolled himself in Maximus, which he completed in February of this year. February 23rd, 2022, he completed his Maximus rehabilitation program. On January 21st, 2022, about a month before he completed Maximus, and as soon as he was eligible, based on his criminal probation, he filed an instant petition for early termination. And he filed that about 2 years and 2 months after being placed on the 5-year guideline minimum probation. It is Mr. Jones' burden by clear and convincing evidence to demonstrate that he is rehabilitated and that his license should be fully reinstated with no probation. At this time, we don't have anything else to add, but we do reserve the right to cross-examine Mr. Jones. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. One moment, please.
Madam Court Reporter, if I'm talking too fast, just give me the eyeball and I'll slow down.
Mr. Jones?
Can
Of cour-
everyone hear me okay?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
going to place you under oath, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead and please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give shall be the truth under penalty of perjury under the laws of the state of California?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Thank
Judge.
you. You can put your hand down now. For the record, as you know, we have the court reporter here. If you could please state and spell your first, middle, and last name.
Sure. My name is Ryan Eric Jones.
Thank you. Go ahead and spell it for the record.
Sorry. RyanEricJones.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Jones, now's your opportunity to provide your argument to the board, okay?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the board for allowing me to be here today. For
Put
this
that
petition.
microphone a little closer to you.
Yes,
Maybe
ma'am.
pull the whole thing closer, to make
Is
sure.
this better?
I don't have good hearing, so I'm sorry.
Okay. Is this better?
That's much better.
Okay.
Yeah, just get it
Okay.
real close to you so we can really hear
Got
what you
you.
have to say. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to thank the board for allowing me to be here today for this petition. I'm very grateful for this opportunity today. On Christmas Eve of 2018, I committed a very immensely shameful act while under the influence of alcohol. In 2007, I had a DUI. I wrote a letter to the board that was a mistake and that would never happen again. 10 years later, I had a second DUI, and it happened again. I wrote a letter at that time saying I made another mistake, and it won't happen again, and that I was not a mean person. And a couple years later, I did a very mean thing. And that just shows you the progression of what alcoholism has done to my life and the manifestation of it. Prior to that incident on Christmas Eve, there's a lot of turmoil going on in my social life, in my personal life, within my family. There's a lot of dissenting dynamics going on, and quite simply, I didn't know how to handle it, and I turned to alcohol frequently. But what it did, it started to manifest resentment, anger, frustration. I started developing a lot of self-pity. I felt overwhelmed and underappreciated in my household, and I just handled things very poorly. I kind of practiced cowardice. I didn't communicate my feelings and express my emotions appropriately. I entered the recovery program voluntarily. I love being a physical therapist. I love what I do, but I love my family even more. I love my kids. And as I started working the program, I started to love myself again. Entering the program, I had a spiritual malady. I was an agnostic. Steps 2 and 3 were difficult for me, but I developed my higher power, and that's been the key to one of the most important virtues in my recovery, which is acceptance. I've learned to accept life on life terms and let things go that are out of my control. As I continued to work the steps, I realized I started shining light on these emotional liabilities and these character defects that I had harnessed. And I started replacing them with virtues of humility, courage, patience. And as I continued to work the program, I started making amends to the people that I had harmed, mainly my family. And I received forgiveness. And I learned how to forgive others too. And that's also been a big virtue and a big principle in my life. I'm at the point now in my recovery where I'm sharing my experiences, my strength, and my hope with other alcoholics. I sponsor 2 individuals in AA. I meet with my sponsor once a week, and I still continue to attend board AA meetings. I'm a trusted servant in my home group. Unfortunately, there's been some major changes in my life that were necessary for my long-term recovery. One of those was ending my marriage of 10 years. We tried to make it work. We went through a lot of counseling. I shared my feelings and confided my issues with my sponsor and other members of the fellowship. But it it was best for my long-term recovery to end that. And unfortunately, I wanted that to work because I didn't have that growing up. And I wanted my kids to have a family. And that was the most important thing to me. But I've learned about acceptance. And I have to let things go and understand that it's not part of God's plan for me. But there's been some, excuse me. There's been some beautiful moments in my recovery. We co-parent very well. She's an outstanding person, and I've identified those positive aspects about her. We both coach our daughter's basketball team, and we assist in our son's basketball team. And really the only thing we argue about now is what defense to run, so it's not as bad anymore. My relationship with my mother has never been better. We hashed out a lot of the demons that were affecting our relationship prior, and I've been fortunate enough to have the privilege of her helping me with the down payment of my house. Thank you so much. Thank you. And move myself and my kids into a good school district in Glendora, and my kids have their own room now, and I'm very fortunate to that. I ran my first marathon in November of last year. I had a previous back surgery and 2 ankle surgeries, and I physically didn't think I could do that. And I struggled mentally with that aspect, but I pushed myself to do things that weren't comfortable, and that was one of my goals, and I did it. The hardest thing for me in recovery has been sharing my experiences. The first few months, I cried a lot, much like I'm doing right now. Because it's hard for me to express my emotions and get those things out. But it's important for me in my recovery, and I'm grateful for that. And that's what brings me here today. I have the opportunity within my work, within my clinic, to expand myself as a potential director and potential shareholder. And I have an awesome supervisor and an awesome boss who has taken me in and has really helped me out in this journey. I feel like a new person. I feel like a transformed person, a reformed individual. And I look at what happened in the past as, unfortunately, necessary events. Luckily, no one was hurt deeply, and but it helped me wake up and find this recovery and understand who I truly am. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I'd like to turn over to Mr. Davis. If you have any cross-examination of Mr. Jones.
I do, Your Honor. Thank you for your candid comments, Mr. Jones. I'm going to go a little more in depth regarding your history in order for this board to be able to test your acceptance of responsibility, among other things. So there may be some difficult questions, and I just want you to know that those may be coming. So what's your current work situation, and where are you working?
I work full-time at a clinic called Pta 360 in Covina, California.
And how many patients a day do you see approximately?
It ranges from 15 to 20, 25, depending on the volume.
And are you in a specialized area of practice, or is it just general physical therapy?
It's mainly orthopedic physical therapy.
And how long have you worked at PT 360?
I've been there almost 5 years now.
Were you there when you got the 2017 DUI?
No, I was not.
You understand that the qualities of integrity and honesty are integral to the practice of physical therapy, correct?
I understand, yes.
And how you hold yourself out speaks not only to your own quality as a provider, but also to the profession in general. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
Going back to your first DUI, you were convicted in 2007, is that right?
That's right.
And you'd been out drinking on the night of October 22nd, 2006. That's when the arrest occurred.
I believe so, yes.
Who were you out with?
Friends From college.
Okay. Not colleagues from work?
No.
And you mentioned in your letter to the board that you were going to try to beat the case until you discovered your blood alcohol level was at .13. You remember writing that?
I believe I had hired an attorney at that time, yes.
And during that experience with the 2006 arrest and 2007 conviction, did you have any inkling that alcohol was a problem for you at that point?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Did you think it was just bad luck?
Yes.
And as you mentioned during your comments, you promised this board that it would never happen again,
I did.
and it did happen again.
Yes, sir.
In 2017, can you kind of explain to us what happened the night you were arrested?
My wife and kids were out of town that weekend. We were in an interesting transition at work. The company I used to work for, Athletic Rehabilitation Center, was bought out by a hospital. And in that transition time, we worked for the hospital. We met some new colleagues and friends in that transition. And I believe it was after the 4th of July weekend, we decided to go to Claremont and hang out at some bars.
So this was with physical therapy colleagues?
Yes, some of which.
Do you recall if patient care or treatment modalities, anything of that nature, were discussed that night while you were out drinking?
No, I don't recall that.
And again, you promised the board that this would never happen again,
I did.
and you mentioned that in your opening comments. And despite the second promise, 1.5 years later, it did happen again.
Yes, sir.
And let me ask you this. After you got the 2017 DUI, was there any inkling in your head that alcohol was a problem for you, or did you still think you could control it?
There was an inkling, but I wasn't ready to accept it yet.
And then about 1.5 years later, you came home on Christmas Eve, and can you describe for us what happened that night?
So Christmas Eve, we ended work at noon, and we went to a restaurant close by where we were having a Christmas party. The party was from roughly 2 to 5. I was there longer than that. Most people had left. I had just gotten a new phone, and I wasn't driving. I thought I had a problem drinking and driving. When I had the new phone, I didn't download the Uber app, and in my intoxication, I couldn't figure out how many palm trees are in the picture when you do the app, or something like that, and I couldn't get the app to go. I ended up running home because I was supposed to meet my mom there to get dinner ready, and that was roughly 3.5 miles away, in a Christmas sweater and dress shoes. I was running home, and the problem is I was very disheveled when I got home. My mom arrived. My wife at the time was working late, and my kids were coming home with my in-laws later, and I was supposed to get dinner ready, and I was struggling with that. And during that time, I was drinking as well. My mom saw that, I was quite disheveled. Arguments broke out between her and I. When I was running home, I was trying to text and communicate, and I vaguely remember this, but the phone fell out. Was ran over by a car. I picked it up, ran home. It was broken. When my wife did get home, she was quite upset about that. She did get me the phone, and an argument broke out. And my wife was holding our 2-year-old daughter when I pushed her down. My father-in-law stepped in, my mother stepped in, and I reacted the way I did, in a shameful way, and I don't recall a lot after that moment. I just remember being outside and the sheriff's coming, talking with me, and me talking with my father-in-law, and being arrested.
So you don't recall hitting your mother in the face multiple times?
I do recall parts of it.
But as you sit here today, you admit that you violently attacked your wife and mother on that evening.
Yes.
And you admit that you drove well beyond the legal limit both in 2007 and in 2017, correct?
I did. Yes, sir.
So after the event, well, now that wasn't the first time that you had physically assaulted your wife, correct?
There have been moments where I was physical and had pushed her under the influence.
Prior to that night.
Yes. Unfortunately, it was both ways. We had very physical relationships in moments of our marriage.
And after this event, was this a wake-up call for you? Is that how you would describe it?
Absolutely.
Was there any doubt in your mind after that event that alcohol become a real problem in your life?
Absolutely.
When did you begin Maximus?
January 9th, I believe, was my enroll date.
And that was, well, after the 2019 incident, you went to jail, correct?
Yes, I did, for 9 days.
So you entered Maximus shortly after being released from jail, is that right?
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about what Maximus is and describe the program that you went through?
Sure. Maximus is a recovery program. You enter into, you submit monthly reports to Maximus. You have random drug and alcohol screenings. You attend 90 meetings of AA in 90 days, and it gets tapered down to 5 days a week and then 3 days a week as you progress throughout the program. There's group support meetings that are twice a week, and so I attended those diligently. And in 2 years, I was in the transition phase of Maximus, which basically meant I did not have to attend the group support meetings. I was not required to attend AA meetings, but I still did.
Okay. Did you find a degree of accountability in your sobriety being monitored by Maximus?
Yes,
And did you likewise, or do you likewise feel a degree of accountability being monitored by the board through your probation?
I do.
So, in retrospect, you told us that in 2007 and 2017, it wasn't enough of a wake-up call for you to address your drinking. In retrospect now, how many years do you think you drank alcoholically prior to getting sober?
When I started college, probably in 2001.
And you were evaluated as part of your underlying case by an individual named Gregory Skipper, MD. Do you remember that?
That's correct.
And you reported to him that you suffered blackouts, plural, over your years of drinking. Is that right?
I believe so.
And I believe you reported to Maximus as part of your clinical diagnostic evaluation that you began drinking about 18. You reported 3 times per week drinking beginning about 8 years prior to entering Maximus. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
And 5 times a week drinking for the past about 4 years. Is that right?
It was quite heavy, yes.
Did you drink heavy every time you drank?
Not every time. No, but it was becoming more regular.
Okay, and then as we discussed, you completed Maximus in February of this year. Now that that is not part of your sobriety, what are you doing to maintain sobriety in the absence of the Maximus program?
Well, I attend meetings regularly. I sponsor 2 individuals. I meet with my sponsor. I'm a trusted servant in my home group. So I have responsibilities in my recovery. I've replaced a lot of these so-called triggers or urges with other things. You know, I've been running. You know, I do meditation. I coach my kids, and I'm a sobriety coach. So there's a lot of things that have filled the void. And I realize what alcohol has done to my life. I realize what kind of person it made me. It never did me any favors. And I've put it behind me.
So speaking of your participation in AA, how often do you attend AA during a given week?
Physically, 2 times a week, usually.
And do you have a home group?
Yes.
And do you have any commitments other than sponsoring individuals?
I do, usually.
What are those?
I can be a trusted servant where I read different prayers, third, seventh step, serenity prayers. I serve coffee a lot of times, and I help clean up and pick up chairs before and after meetings.
Since completing Maximus, have you suffered any relapses?
No, sir.
And this is my calculation, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've been sober approximately 3 years and 9 months? Right?
That's correct.
And one of the tenets of AA is one day at a time, right?
That's correct.
And what does that mean?
That means that dwelling on the past can lead to depression. Worrying about the future can result in anxiety. But if you live in the present, as cliche as it sounds, it's a gift. And you can't worry about the things that you did. You can't focus on the things that hasn't happened to you yet. But life is precious, and it's one day at a time.
Does it also stand for the concept that sobriety is tenuous and it's only good for the present 24 hours?
That's correct.
When I asked you earlier if you felt a degree of accountability and benefit from being monitored by this board, you said yes. So my question is why do you want to terminate your probation early?
Well, I'm at the point in my career where I can advance my career. The stipulations with the probation don't allow me to do that. The patient acknowledgement, as far as them signing the paper that states that I am on probation, is very difficult. And there's a lot of anxiety around that, having them do that, and it's developing a level of trust with my patient to do that. So that limits my patient population in my workplace. And our referral source, we don't want them aware of that, obviously. So that kind of limits who I see. And as far as the testing is concerned, it gets quite expensive. There's some times where my kids have tournaments on the weekends, and if I have to test, my life is revolved around it. I have to find a location, make sure there's a male on staff. And there's been moments where I've been to a clinic for 2 hours with my kids with me, and that takes away a lot of time for them. And during the week, when I do get selected, I have to move my schedule around to allow me to go test. And it's just, it can be difficult.
Okay, thank you. Over the years, prior to getting sober, did you ever drink at work?
No,
No alcohol at work?
no,
Did you ever go to work feeling the effects of drinking from the night before?
I have been to work in a hungover state before, yes.
Your Honor, I have a document that I want to add as an exhibit. I have a copy for each of the board members, and I'll give one to Mr. Jones as well. I guess we can mark it as 19. And what this is a declaration and web capture from the Attorney General's Office of Digital Investigations. And it's a web capture of Mr. Jones' Facebook page and certain photos on that page. And the first several pages of this are a declaration from the investigator who conducted the web capture yesterday. And if we page forward through the exhibit, it discusses the procedure, what they captured, where they captured it from, and then we get to the photos that were captured. The first photo is a photo of the petitioner, Mr. Jones. We've redacted the other individuals in the photo. This photo is just offered to identify that the web capture was done of Mr. Jones' webpage. The second photo, as you can see, is a picture of 3 different bottles of liquor. And the caption on that, purportedly posted by Mr. Jones, is "Not a bad day at work." Is that picture accurate?
That is accurate, but I was not consuming that at work. Those were gifts at that time, I believe.
Gifts from,
I don't recall exactly if they were patients. I'm not really entirely sure. But I do remember that picture, yes.
and it's still currently up on your Facebook page, correct?
I'm not sure. Obviously it is since you printed it.
And you were concerned, you testified earlier that one of the reasons you want to get off probation is because referral sources, we want to keep it from referral sources. We don't want them to know that you're on probation with the board and that sort of thing, right? And you know that your disciplinary record is posted on the board's website, correct?
Correct.
And so a consumer theoretically could identify that and find this on your social media page, and you can understandably understand why it's a bad look. It infers drinking at work.
It does. That was from 2014, I believe.
Yeah, I believe it was.
Yeah.
I believe that's all I have at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you. One moment, please.
We'd like to offer that exhibit as well, Your Honor.
Yes, thank you. So, Exhibit 19, I'm marking as such. Any objections to Exhibit 19?
I'm just concerned about the date of that, considering that was a time when I was struggling with alcohol. But just for the record, I did not consume that at work. That was not something that I did at work at that time. Those were gifts for home.
And to clarify, the date of the photo on Facebook is August 15, 2014?
Yes.
Okay. So, as far as any objection, I'm overruling the objection. But for the record, I am indicating the date. Again, as stated, was August 15, 2014, that particular photo was posted and still remains on your Facebook page. Okay?
I'm sorry, I'm not, as far as Facebook is concerned, I haven't had a chance to scroll to my past and delete many things on there presently for posts about my kids, but I haven't, or nor did I think that that would become an issue. So I will definitely delete that post. I'm sorry. And any other posts that show anything like that.
Okay. I'll go ahead and after we're done with cross-examination, the board and myself might have some questions for you.
Sure.
That I'll allow you to what we call is redirect and offer, additional testimony regarding what we're talking about today. Okay?
Sure.
So make a mental note.
Okay.
Okay, great. Before I open it to the board, I have some questions myself, real quick. What's the definition of a trusted servant?
A trusted servant is someone who does many different duties, mainly secretarial work. They could be someone who collects money, someone who makes coffee. It can be someone who can read different prayers or read the principles in a meeting. It's someone who can basically do a variety of different things.
Thank you. And then you indicated in the Maximus program, you had individual meetings and group meetings. Can you just go back and explain how long were those individual one-on-one meetings, and how long did those last? And And as far as the group meetings, how long were those?
So the group meetings were twice a week. I believe they were Mondays and Wednesdays, and they were with other healthcare professionals. And those lasted about an hour to an hour and a half. The individual meetings were, I was probably referring to my AA meetings
Ah,
or my meetings with my sponsor at that time.
thank you. And the AA meetings that you still attend
Yes, ma'am.
are group meetings?
No, ma'am. They're traditional AA meetings.
Okay. And those are twice a week, you said?
Yes,
In person?
in person.
What's your sobriety date?
December 25th, 2018.
When's the last time you had a drink of alcohol?
December 24th, 2018.
What are the ages of your children?
10 and 6. Jalen is 10 and Jordan is 6.
Do you share custody of them?
Yes, ma'am. It is 50-50.
Okay, for now, that's all my questions. I'd like to open up to the board. Any board members have any questions?
If we could start with Ms. McMillian.
Thank you so much for being here,
Thank you.
for being here today. And I do want to commend you on how far you've gotten in your sobriety. I just have two questions
Yes,
to
ma'am.
ask you. Did your family seek therapy after this incident, and what was they did? What was the outcome?
Unfortunately, there was no specific therapy. My wife at the time did try Al-Anon for a while, which is associated with Alcoholics Anonymous. It's when spouses or family members want to understand about the disease. But unfortunately, she didn't want to continue that. So there wasn't anything other than our marriage counseling towards the end.
So you going through AA and all the other avenues that are helping you fix you, have you had any conversation with your wife about seeking help after the incident?
Yes, ma'am. I really tried to get her involved in what I was going through and understanding. And initially, there was an agreement with that. But one of the reasons that we had to get a divorce was for my long-term sobriety. There was a lot of resentment regarding dynamics within our relationship. Unfortunately, she didn't want to commit to any of those things. But we did want to try to mend our relationship within our marriage. We tried, but it just, things just didn't work out that way.
Okay, so let me just see if you can grasp why I'm asking you these questions, because I am a survivor
Yes, ma'am.
of domestic violence. And the statistics show that it takes at least 15 beatings before a woman will even report an incident, a situation. And so the reason why I asked you that question is because it sounds like, it appears as if your wife is still carrying the burden of what happened to her. I know I still do. And I came to terms with mine in 2007, and I did seek counseling. And so I know you're working on your sobriety and fixing you, but I'd like to know if you're acknowledging.
Yes, ma'am. We've had many talks. We have not sought, or at least I haven't pushed for her to seek that specifically. But her and I and our families have talked. Her mom and her dad take me in like I'm one of their sons, and they continue to do so. They pick up the kids and drop them off to me and vice versa, and we interact all the time. She's a very tough person, and I don't know her mental status on that specifically, other than when I was making my amends and, apologizing and explaining what I dealt with as a child, witnessing abuse and alcoholism as a child and how it potentially affected me, and how my relationship with my mother was as a teenager growing up, moving from Tennessee to San Francisco and handling these changes and things like that. But it was never of interest, to be honest. But I agree with what you're saying. I think women, anyone that goes through anything like that, should seek help. And when we were doing our marriage counseling, there were some one-on-one times. And obviously that's something that was discussed with her psychologist at the time. So I'm not sure what was discussed, but I know what was discussed with me. And there's a lot of issues. I'm not blaming her by any means. Obviously I was no angel, but there was some issues that I had problems with as well. And but I agree. I think that would be something that she needs to look into. I think she hides her emotions a lot too, very similar to how I was. Fortunately for me, I've been able to express my emotions for the past few years and get that out. AA's been like free counseling. And I tried to get her into Al-Anon, and she did try a few times, but she was uncomfortable with it.
I'm going to encourage you to continue on your journey of recovery and redemption.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all I have to ask you.
Good morning, Mr. Jones. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You mentioned in your opening statement acknowledging your triggers. And I'd just like to know if you feel like those are different now than what they were a few years ago.
Yeah, I think anything was triggering me. The urge was there no matter what. In the past, I would drink for jovial occasions, anything good. I would drink for anything bad, anything stressful. What I've come to find is alcoholism is a very perspective disease. We look for excuses to want to be able to drink. We're just hiding from a lot of the issues, really. So triggers for me now, I look at it as something that I've learned from. I replace these issues that cause resentment with these virtues that I've learned. I've learned to become patient. I've learned the steps to what it takes to be a patient person who has humility and who can forgive and let go of situations that are out of my control. And I have the fellowship to express these things to, my sponsor that I can talk to about it and get opinions on. So I have a support staff, in other words, that is very important to me. But alcoholism is much like an itch. You want to scratch it, but that doesn't mean you roll around in poison oak. And for me, I'm not going nowhere near Poison Oak. It's kind of like the fitness guru or the person who's diabetic. For health reasons, they pass right by McDonald's, Burger King, Taco Bell because they know it's not healthy for them. The fitness guru has goals, and I have goals, and I know what's not healthy for me. And like I said before, alcohol has never done me any favors. I have that constant reminder of what it did and who I was
Do you still
to
get
lean
itchy?
on. No, I don't.
And some of the other triggers that led you to be quick to anger in the past, are those still present in your life?
No one is perfect. And as we say in recovery, it's progress, not perfection. Yes, revenant defects are always there. But that's why the meetings are so important to me. That's why me sponsoring individuals helps with my recovery, because I can share those experiences. And when I was working one of the steps, step 4, my inventory, I review of resentments list, I identified a lot of those triggers, what they were. Whether it's stress, whether it's anxiety for something, a lot of it can be easily resolved if you just change your perspective on how you see things. I didn't see these things in the past. It's very much a perception disease. And I had a bad perception or perspective of life at that time. And I'm very blessed what I'm able to do now. Go to my kids' practices, watch them. I love it. In the past, I would look at it as a chore, pick them up, take them to school, but I enjoy every moment now.
Thank you. I think just one more question. You've had a lot of growth and a lot of healing in the last couple of years. And I just want to know if you can see value in allowing the rest of your probation to play out for that continued growth and healing, but also on our part for added public protection in case of lapse of judgment because of the, I guess, assurance that you once had with your prior convictions and the letters that you wrote. How is it different now?
I realized when I wrote those letters now that I couldn't identify that I had struggles with alcohol. I was in denial, but I've identified it now. I see that I had a true issue with alcohol. But you're right, there's a level of accountability associated with the probation. I just feel very strong in my recovery at this time, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you. No
Thank
further
you.
questions. Dr. Drummer?
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Opening, it's not an easy thing to do, especially on camera in front of a whole bunch of strangers. Were both of your children home on Christmas Eve, 2017?
Yes, sir.
What kind of interactions have you had with them about what happened that night and about your alcoholism?
They were very young ages. My daughter was 2 at the time, and my son was 6.
And I understand that,
Yeah,
but I have recollections of traumatic things
right.
that happened when I was very young. 3, I have memories of things. And I know that it had an impact on my life. So I'm wondering what kinds of things you've done to address those issues with your children.
Yes, as well as mine. I witnessed those things too at an early age. I haven't discussed directly what my son witnessed in that time. My daughter, I don't think, would have understood what was happening. I don't know if he really quite could grasp what was happening. But I reassure him that he is loved, especially during this time of divorce, that he is loved and that we are doing it for their benefit so that they can live a happy life. As far as in the past, unfortunately, there was a moment where I couldn't be home for a while, so I couldn't directly, right off the bat, have a conversation with him. I've brought up moments where, do did you know that dad had a problem with certain things? And he has no real clue about that. But I do make sure my son is honest and open with me about any feelings that he has. And they're very healthy, smart kids. And from my knowledge, it doesn't seem to have played a role with him. And, but potentially it's something that we could talk about.
Did your early childhood play a role with what's happened in your life?
Yes, sir. My mother had me when she was 17, and she wanted to continue school. I lived with my alcoholic uncle, and then when that didn't work out, my alcoholic aunt, who recently passed away from her alcoholism. And I witnessed a lot of sibling fighting within that time period. My mom was still young. She was practically a kid when she had me. And it was difficult being raised in that situation. We were very poor. But my mom is a tough woman. She was an LVN, she became an RN, and then she went to medical school, and now she's an anesthesiologist. So she's developed a very strong alpha mentality, and I love that part about her now. In the past, we had our headbutts because of that, and unfortunately, a lot of those revenue issues came about Christmas Eve from our past, but we've been able to hash that out. But to answer your question, yes, I did experience those things at a young age. My cousin and I both experienced those things.
Okay. I encourage you to really dive deeper with your kids so that they have a better understanding, because you have scars from your past that are, they're there. You know what they were. You know how they influenced you. We all do.
Yes, sir.
And they do. But being able to be more outward with that, I think, will be beneficial.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
I have two questions. You are seeking an early end to your probation, and from what I've heard, you identified that you want the early end to your probation due to the testing inconvenience and due to work opportunities. Are there any other reasons for wanting to end your probation early?
One of the bigger issues is the patient acknowledgement with the probation. It's difficult at times to address that with them, with the new patients. A lot of times questions are asked about what it is I'm on probation for. And when I'm trying to earn trust with the new patient, it makes it very difficult. And so that's a big reason. But yeah, there are opportunities at work to advance my career to make it more comfortable for me and my family and less financial stress. And yes, the testing as well.
Thank you. My second question is, what is your plan for continuing AA? For how long? What is your plan? I understand that sobriety is 24 hours at a time, but in the interest of protecting the public, what is your plan moving forward?
There is no timetable. I will continue to go to meetings. I have a responsibility. I have two individuals that I'm sponsoring. One received a 9-month chip and the other received a 6-month chip recently. So I have responsibilities within my group, and I have a new family with them. I have a lot of friends now. I feel like I have a new family, and there really is no timetable. I will continue to go to meetings.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have some questions about your AA experience.
Yes, ma'am.
Which step has been most impactful for you?
Step 3 was probably the most impactful. Because God was such an issue with me being an agnostic going into the program. But I made a decision to turn my life over to God, and learning that acceptance, letting things go that were out of my control. That's when it was actually the first step of action for me, was step 3. So that was probably the biggest one. The most challenging one was making my amends, step 9, because there was a lot of difficult things I had to come about and tell my family members about myself, you know, and how I truly felt. And that was tough because it was the people closest to me. But, and part of that step was also being able to forgive those that did you harm as well. So, probably step 3 and step 9.
You mentioned forgiveness. Have you forgiven yourself?
Yes, I have to. It's tough to revisit that time, but it's a constant reminder of who I was and who I will never be again.
Thank you. My final question is regarding your sponsorship of 2 individuals. What are the greatest lessons you've learned from that experience?
Well, I enjoy being a sobriety coach. I call myself a sobriety coach. Just hearing their stories and how it relates to what I was dealing with and what I did to get better in that position. So a lot of what my sponsor had me do, I have them do. And it's just seeing the progress and starting to see that they are establishing these principles and virtues that I did, and that they're consistent. You know, I had one that didn't work out. I had 3 initially, and these last 2 are doing really well. And it's very inspiring to see that, and it's starting to kind of have them start to share their experiences as well. Is also very rewarding, and I feel a huge lift when I see that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Jones.
Good morning, sir.
I echo your, or the sentiment of the other board members. This must be very difficult. Just a difficult time, but I appreciate you being here. A couple of short follow-up questions. My colleagues have already touched on a few of these. Dr. Armstrong asked you about your reasons for requesting early termination being the burden of biologic fluid testing, the sort of the letter to the patients, and then re-credentialing in order to advance your professional career trajectory. If I asked you, are any of the terms set in your probation preventing you from practicing physical therapy?
They're not preventing me from practicing, no, sir.
So you're able to see patients regularly without any restrictions?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had sort of, and I apologize if I misinterpreted this, so please do correct me. Did I hear you mention that in your past with your ex-wife, there was some sort of physicality at times?
There was.
Okay, and was alcohol involved?
Yes, it was.
All of those times?
Yes.
Okay, so there was no time where alcohol was not part of that
No.
physical interaction with your wife. If we asked, of course this is hypothetical, Your Honor, you may limit me, but if we were to ask a coworker or a patient, would they say, Dr. Jones is really angry with me, patients might say. I don't do my exercises, he gets very upset, or I don't do my home plan of care, or colleagues that might say, you know, he's just a little on edge.
Are you asking if the...
Yeah, would any one of those folks say those words?
I haven't had any kind of issue like that. I think one of the issues prior to entering recovery was I was working 2 jobs. You know, I had a full-time job and I had a per diem job at a hospital to save up money, to put money aside to help my wife at the time with her schooling. And at times, you know, it can be stressful working 50 to 60 hours a week. But since then, I've learned, and obviously being in probation, that's limited my hours, and I can focus on my one clinic, and that's been good for me, less overwhelming. But yes, no, I haven't had any issue with that.
So you're a pretty even-tempered fellow at work?
Yeah, I feel like I'm a good physical therapist. I'm sound and professional. One of my sponsor might told me maybe you're using up all your equity at work and you don't leave any at home. And that's one of the issues I've had to think about is how do I separate who I am at work, who's someone very professional and sound, and create enough energy to have that at home. So one of the things I've learned is how to balance that. Be professional, and being in this recovery program has allowed me to be even better clinician, more efficient, but it's also allowed me to, appreciate the things I have at home and be more present.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Good morning, Mr. Jones.
Hello.
So, I've had a lot of, obviously, DV in my life. I watched my aunt get beat by her husband, and I still think about that, still kind of have some resentment there in what I saw. And so I know some of the board members pressed on, like, were you talking to your children about it to kind of break the generational? And so are you in a relationship now?
No, sir.
Okay. When was the last time you were violent with someone?
That night.
Okay. Because I guess my concern is that moving forward, is it the alcohol that made you commit those acts, or is that something within you? And have you fixed whatever that is?
Right. That's a good question. A lot of what I've identified in AA is that it's a perception or perspective disease. That most people in the program have those underlying emotional liabilities like I had. And it's identifying them, shedding light on them, and replacing them with principles. Because yes, I had some anger issues, but it's how I handled it. I wasn't able to express how I felt or communicate. I had a lot of issues with self-pity, and that would lead to frustration. And the reason I drank so much in that last part of my drinking days was because I wanted to mask those things. I wasn't able to healthily bring those things out. And I'm able to do so. So, yeah, there were moments where I could get angry when I was sober. But unfortunately, it came out in the most unhealthy of ways, and that's because I was intoxicated. And it seemed to happen when I was intoxicated. But I don't have issues, or I didn't have issues as far as physical altercations when I was sober.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from board members? Ms. Paglia?
Just one more question. I know that you have referenced how challenging and difficult some of the processes have been, but I just want to know, did you think that they would be easy?
Oh, no, ma'am. No, ma'am. When I first entered recovery, I was going to AA meeting every day, but I also had the court-appointed things that I had to do as well, which were community labor, anger management classes, going to the intensive outpatient program. So there was a lot of recovery going on at that time, but I wanted it and I needed it. This hasn't been an easy journey. The first year was quite difficult. But when I reworked the steps, things started to get a lot easier. And it has been easier because I'm experiencing more of the serenity from working the program. And I'm starting to put the past behind me and not dwell on it. And I have to let things go, and my perspective on life has changed. So there's been a lot of growth.
Okay, one last question. Wife and your mother used one word to describe both of them, and that word was they're both tough. What does that mean?
Well, I think I've always, my mom had struggled. She was 17 when she had me. She was kind of cast out by her mom, my grandmother. And she had to fend for herself. I had to live with other family members while she was pursuing her career, but it made her very strong. It made her like an alpha, a stubborn woman. But the problem was that we had a lot of bouts. She had some issues on her own that she had to deal with too. But she's a strong woman, and I respect that so much about her now. This whole perspective issue has kind of shed light on the fact that she's a tremendous person, has done tremendous things for me, especially. Like I said, she helped me put a down payment on a home recently. She knows how I've come along. And that's what I respect my ex-wife for. And I mentioned the positive attributes that she has, and I dwell on that too. I didn't want a wife who was passive. I wanted someone who was strong-willed and stubborn. Maybe because that's kind of how my mom was. I don't know how that works subconsciously, but she's tough too. There's just some things that within our marriage that just didn't work out, and that's okay. But you've kind of wakened up my attention as far as like what she's going through, and the fact that even though she puts on this face of toughness, that she might be struggling with some things.
And
More
that
internally.
and that you may have contributed it to some of it.
Absolutely. And I think we've addressed a lot of those issues. But you're right, there could be some more internalizing going on in there. And I do care about her deeply. I still love her, and I want the best for her. But, yeah.
Thank you.
I want to just touch on the aspects of patient care. And you mentioned that presenting your probation status to to your patients is a challenge. Have you had any patients refuse to have you be their physical therapist?
I haven't had patients refuse, but I've had a lot of reluctancy. Many of which ask questions about why I'm on probation and what I did. 50% of the time, I would say people sign it and don't ask much of anything. But there are people that have a reluctancy, some of which don't return. The issue at my work is the way we run is based on referrals, from doctors that are key to our success. And my supervisor has been great in allowing me to continue working there, but it makes it difficult to see certain doctors who send patients that I have to present that to. So that puts me, I see a lot of workman's comp and HMO patients, and I don't mind. I enjoy what I do. I'll see anybody. And but in the future, he doesn't want to be a full-time therapist, and he wants to be part-time and have the opportunity to be the director at the clinic. And that would be very tough to have to continue doing that if I were to reach that goal.
What do you tell when you present you're on probation to me, your patient?
Well, I tell them,
Why are you on probation? What happened?
So you're the patient asking me?
I'm the patient asking you.
Well, I would say you can refer to the board's website for specific details, but I did have some issues with alcohol in my past, and they are behind me. I'm a better person for what I've done in my recovery. I was in a program for 3 years. I'm out of that program now. I'm still currently on probation, and this is where I am today. And that's generally how it goes.
And does anybody ask, well, what did you do?
Yes.
Okay. And
And-
what's your response? What did you do?
I don't tell them specifically about the domestic violence. I said I've had some previous driving under the influence issues, and there were some problems at home as well. I feel like if I said something about domestic violence, that obviously there would be a huge reluctancy and trust. So it presents a lot of anxiety.
How do you deal with that anxiety?
I try to be positive. I try to be as truthful as I can, but I try to be professional. And during my initial interview, I tried to, earn that trust and professionalism with them. And most of the cases, it's pretty good. It's signed, it's not asked about. But in some cases, we see a lot of law enforcement where I work at, and some of the guys want to know specifically what I did. So I have told a few exactly what I did. My assumption is that they would be a little quite reluctant, but some of them are like, oh, okay, well, that sucks. Okay, well, what do I do now? You know, so it's, I get a little bit of everything, a little bit of reluctancy. I get a little bit of, okay. But yeah, it's quite heightened on the anxiety.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, board members. Let's see. Recross?
I think he gets a chance to
Redirect?
because we all just crossed him, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Okay. Mr. Jones,
Yes, ma'am.
now's your opportunity to provide any additional testimony that you would like to provide. If you have any, you may do so now.
I don't have any additional testimony at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple follow-up questions based on the board's questions. Be very brief. In terms of AA, has it been your experience that people with long-term sobriety in AA attend meetings almost every day?
If not almost every day, at least 3 to 4 times a week, I would.
And you think, given your relatively short-term sobriety, that 2 times is enough?
Well, it comes down to the time management with my kids and practice, and the fact that I am coaching, and the fact that I'm meeting with sponsees. So technically, I'm involved in recovery 3 to 4 days a week. The 2 meetings are tangible meetings that I'm present at. Online meetings for meditation on Thursday nights I do online. So there are online meetings that I attend as well. Sorry for the confusion there.
Oh. And one of the board members asked about your cravings, and you said they're not around anymore. When did they stop?
I think after I reworked the steps, my second year in, I felt like I had shed any kind of issue with alcoholism. I felt pretty good. I felt healthy. My body felt healthy. I would go to weddings. I would go to events, and I would see it, and I wouldn't have any triggers or urges. And I continue to go to those events with my kids. I went to a wedding recently and had a great time. And alcohol was everywhere. And I just sort of laughed in amusement, knowing that was me, 5 years ago. But it's not part of me anymore.
And how often do you talk to your sponsor?
At least once a week. But we text throughout the week.
Do you text every day?
Not every day. Probably every other day or every third day.
And my last couple questions. As part of your domestic violence conviction, did you attend the 52-week DV course?
Yes, sir.
Can you describe what that course was?
It was a once-a-week class where you met, and it's kind of similar to AA. We sat around in a group and we just talked about what we were doing, how we were feeling. Occasionally we would do little worksheets, but to be honest, it wasn't anything near like what I got out of an AA meeting. Some of that was just more just to say you went and did it. I didn't get a lot of benefit out of that like I did at the meetings.
Did it have an anger management component, or was that a separate requirement of your probation?
That was part of the component, yeah.
Were there counselors counseling you regarding anger management, or was it just kind of a group?
There was one anger management counselor, and there was anywhere from 8 to 12 individuals in the room.
Okay. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Okay. Mr. Jones,
Yes, ma'am.
is there anything else you want to add? We'll do closing soon, but not yet.
Okay, no ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So what we'll do now is we're going to move on. We'll do closing arguments, summaries, essentially. And I'll go ahead and have you begin, and then I'll allow Mr. Davis to offer one for the Office of Attorney General for the people. And then if you would like, you can have the final word after that, okay? And closing argument is just a summary, really, of what you just said and the points you want to make, and maybe what you, what testimony or documents you think should be given more weight, okay? In order to have a decision in your favor, that is.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay? So I will go ahead and begin with you then, Mr. Jones.
Thank you. Well, I feel like the past 3 years and 9 months have been a very transforming time in my life, and I feel like a reformed individual. I went into the Maximus program voluntarily because I needed the help, and I recognized that I had a problem. During Maximus, I never had a positive test, a diluted test, and an out-of-network test. I submitted everything promptly, and I was diligent in my meetings. I finished a little over 3 years into the program, and it's been 7 months since then. I still keep in contact with a lot of the guys from my group support. I still continue my recovery, and I feel good about my recovery, and I have opportunities to push myself. I mean, to pursue a directorship role in my clinic, and I feel like a reformed person, and I'm very happy about where I am in my life, and I hope the board can see that. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Davis?
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the board, as we discussed in great detail today, the underlying conduct that led to this probationary term for Mr. Jones is quite egregious and quite concerning. The board, in its discretion at the time, felt that a 5-year term of probation was appropriate to fulfill its mandate to protect the public, as we heard in the opening statements this morning. 5 years is guideline minimum for the conduct here. We've got Mr. Jones is to be commended for his recovery in the time that he has been on probation with the board. Yet we've got a very, very years-long history of alcohol abuse and a relatively short period of sobriety. And the public is the primary beneficiary of your probation monitoring, and as Mr. Jones testified himself, he gets a degree of motivation and accountability from the board's probation. Also, the criteria that the board must consider in one of these petitions, and the first prong of that is the nature and severity of the acts. Here, we have very serious acts that, again, resulted in guideline minimum probation. This could have easily been a revocation case, but it wasn't, and we're just here to talk about rehabilitation today. The nature and severity of the acts, as I said, we've talked about them enough, and they are egregious. The length of the applicable probationary period. Mr. Jones completed his criminal probation in January of 2022, and the length of the medical board's probation, or I'm sorry, the PT board's probation is 5 years to address an 11 to 12-year alcohol abuse program. I think that's more than fair. I don't want to minimize what Mr. Jones has done thus far. It's quite commendable. The honesty with which he's testified here today, the integrity. If we were all just advocates for Mr. Jones, we'd probably all agree that, man, he's done a great job. But we have to consider the public protection aspect. 3 years and 9 months of sobriety in the big scheme of things and in his history of conduct is minimal. And I think it's incumbent on this board to deny the petition and see through the full 5 years term of probation. And the way it's been going, I'm sure Mr. Jones will complete it with flying colors and go on to a great career, sans probation, without having to notify his patients. It's the Attorney General's recommendation that the petition be denied. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Jones?
No other comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so with that said, any other questions from the board, anything? No? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing. So the hearing is now closed, and I will excuse you, and we will move on to closed session, but let me go off, we're off the record. One moment, please.
We'll go ahead and go into closed session and maybe take, 10, 15-minute recess and then maybe 15 minutes till 11:05. We might have time to come back for, it just depends how long we go before lunch. Yeah, so 15-minute recess, 11:05.
And Mr. Jones, just want to let you know, there will not be a decision today, as you may know already or not, but one will be issued shortly. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time today,
Board, for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
your testimony, and Mr. Davis, thank you very much. Okay? And you're all excused. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we are back on record, and the time is 1:33. We will be picking up with the rest of closed session this afternoon, but for now, we'll move on to agenda item 6, 7, and 8. I'll turn it over to Brooke Arneson.
Okay, the December draft meeting minutes begin on page 10 of the meeting materials. I will go ahead and ask members if they have any edits. Were there any edits for page 10? Page 11. Page 12. Page 13. Page 14. Page 15. Page 16. Page 17. Page 18. Page 19. Page 20.
Yes. I believe on line 424, it should, sorry about that. I believe on page, it's page 20, line 424, it should read to elect Ms. McMillan as board vice president rather than president.
Thank you, Dr. Armstrong. I'll make that edit. Any further edits on page 20? Page 21. Page 22. Page 23. And that concludes the December 2021 draft meeting minutes.
I move to approve the December 2021 draft minutes with the proposed amendments.
I second.
We have a motion by myself, President Rabina Amen, and a second by Dr. Armstrong. And any further board discussion?
Since I was absent, should I abstain from voting?
Thank you for asking that. So we had Ms. Ellaby, Mr. Irvin, and Dr. Armstrong absent for the December meeting, correct? Yeah, okay. And any further board discussion? Any public comment? And a roll call vote, please.
Alicia Benaman. Dale Armstrong.
Abstain?
Jesus Dominguez.
Aye.
Daniel Drummer.
Aye.
Katerina Ellaby.
Abstain.
Jonathan Irvin.
Abstain.
And Tanya McMillian.
Aye.
See, we've got a motion of 4 ayes and 3 abstentions. Motion carried. And moving on to the March 2022 draft meeting minutes. Were there any edits on page 24? Page 25? Page 26? Page 27?
Yes. I believe that it should read, it says Staff Services Manager I, it should read Staff Services Manager 1. I'm sorry, line 144. Is that, it's also a question.
It's kind of typical, this is representation of Roman numerals.
Okay, okay, got it. Sorry about that.
Were there any other edits on page 27? Page 28? Page 29?
On page 29, line 228, Fsbpt has a typo.
Oh, thank you. I'll make that edit. Any additional edits on page 29? Page 30? Page 31? Page 32? Page 33? Page 34? Page 35? Page 36? Page 37? Page 38? Page 39? Page 40?
Yes, line 654, I believe that the D needs to come off and it should read update rather than updated.
Okay, thank you. I'll make that change. Were there any additional edits on page 40?
Just a question on line 675. Disciplinary guidelines were approved on January 28th, 2021. Is that 2021 or 2022?
I believe it should be 2021, and then it's that quarterly cycle for the regulation calendar.
I see, okay.
So it usually takes effect a couple months after that.
A couple months after, so would that be 2022?
2022. Yep, we'll make that change as well. Thank you. Any additional changes on page 40? Page 41? Page 42? Page 43? Page 44? Page 45? Page 46? Page 47? And that concludes the March 2022 meeting minutes.
I move to adopt the March 2022 minutes with the proposed edits. A motion by myself and a second by Ms. Ellaby. Any further board discussion?
Just in honor of Ms. Beauchamp, her name was misspelled on, I'm sorry, Brooke, page 43,
Okay, we'll make that
and
change.
it's line 770.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other board discussion? Any public comment? And I believe we had a full quorum that meeting, so everyone's eligible to vote. For a roll call vote, please.
Alicia Benjamin. Dale Armstrong. Jesus Dominguez.
Aye.
Daniel Drummer.
Aye.
Katarina Ellaby.
Aye.
Jonathan Irvin.
Aye.
Tanya McMillian.
Aye.
7-0, motion carried. Okay, and the final meeting minutes, the August 15th, 2022 draft meeting minutes. Those begin on page 48. Were there any edits for page 48? Page 49. And that concludes those meeting minutes.
I move to adopt the August 2022 meeting minutes.
Second.
We have a motion by myself and a second by Ms. Ellaby. Any further board discussion? And any public comment? And all members were present, so everyone's eligible to vote. For roll call vote, please.
Alicia Benjamin.
Aye.
Dale Armstrong.
Aye.
Jesus Dominguez.
Aye.
Daniel Drummer.
Aye.
Katarina Ellaby.
Aye.
Jonathan Irvin.
Aye.
Tanya McMillian.
Aye.
7-0, motion carried.
Thank you, Brooke. And indeed, on behalf of this board, you are giving incredible service to the board and to the consumers of California for the excellent minutes that you are keeping.
Thank you very
Excellent
much.
meeting-
Thank
yeah,
you.
meeting minutes. Thank you.
So just a question about that, since we're on that topic. Just kind of want to pull the members in the detail that's being recorded in the minutes, because really that is up to you, right? So if you're satisfied with the level of detail that are currently in the minutes, we'll continue that moving forward. We're going to do some shifting around administratively, and so Brooke is going to be handing the minutes off to someone else and training them, and so I just want to make sure that this is what you guys like to see and what you want to use and reference looking back, that this level of detail is helpful. We'll continue to do that. And I agree. The level and the way that the minutes are collected are laborious and time consuming, but I think for archive's sake, well worth the investment.
I like the way the minutes are captured, especially our votes. I think that level of transparency is essential to move forward.
Yeah. And then I would say, thank you all, because we're now all caught up when it comes to minutes. And the next meeting, the only thing that you'll be reviewing is this meeting's minutes. So I realize that's also very difficult to do, but with Sunset and all of the business that was at hand last year, we kind of sacrificed in some areas, and minutes was one of those things. So thank you for your patience.
Yeah, and I think there were, I don't know, maybe a couple years there where Brooke was really trying to fine tune what it was that we wanted to see and what you needed as staff. And so I think you've got a really good handle on that now, and training someone to continue, that would be fantastic. Okay, agenda item number 9, Sunset Review, Jason Kaiser.
So for the Sunset Review, I was hoping I would be able to tell you today that our Sunrise Bill, SB 1438, was signed by the governor. However, I can't do that just yet. We're still waiting. I have no doubt that we'll have it any day. There's a lot of bills that went moved through the legislature as a result of COVID, kind of some catching up from previous legislative sessions. And so I think there was almost a record number of bills traveling through the legislature and to the governor's desk. So, but again, I'm confident that we'll see that signature very soon. I'd like to thank Dr. Dominguez and Ms. McMillian for all their help and guidance in the committee for the Sunset Report.
And also Dr. Rubina Amen and Ms. McMillian for joining me on the sunset hearing. As you all may know, our authority will be extended until January 1st of 2027, so that's always a good thing. It's kind of a way to measure a board's performance. If you get anything shorter than 4 years, you have problems, and we always get a 4-year extension. So, in addition, we were successful in getting the direct access exemption of the in-person evaluation by a physician or surgeon that was granted by the director of the department during the pandemic, and that will now be something that's currently in the Practice Act and moving forward. So that extension of time and that exemption becoming law is the benefit of our sunset process. And once we receive that bill, you'll get an e-blast out, and there'll be an e-blast that goes out to the licensing population as well. Just waiting. So
Fantastic, thank you.
we see a round of bills about every 3 to 4 days coming off the governor's desk. So
Board member comment or discussion regarding sunset? Any public comment? Thank you, Jason. Looking forward to hearing the news. Let's move on to agenda item number 10, which is our meeting calendar. We are in 2022. This is our adopted calendar, so our dates meeting is different than what's being shown there. And we have the Fsbpt conference coming up at the end of October. Is that a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or just Thursday, Friday, Saturday?
that is you're going to steal my thunder a little bit, but in the next agenda item, that's a Friday, Saturday for members if they'd like to attend. You as the board president and I as the administrator have business on Thursday, but for the rest of the panel, should you have it in your schedule or are able to attend, I'll be sending out an email as a last reminder with all of the arrangements and how to book flights and rooms and that kind of thing with Fsbpt. So just that Friday and Saturday.
Friday and Saturday, okay. And can someone tell me why some of these dates on this entire calendar are bold?
I don't know that they're bold, but there is a font conversion that happens when we try to do ADA compliance. We're still working on that.
Okay, so it doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't.
Okay, thank you. And
Correct.
yes, Tanya, 28th and 29th. However, I will not be attending this meeting. And so, yeah.
Are you able to attend the 27th in her state? Okay.
Yeah, as vice chair, if you can step in on the Thursday for that portion, that would be great. And any board member comment about our December dates that we adopted, the 8th and the 9th?
Madam President,
Yes,
sorry. So I agreed to this before we got our finals schedule. Not a big thing, but on the 9th, Friday, not only do I give my test, but I also have to help if we need to remediate students for our clinical courses. So, good to go on the 8th for sure. Friday, I'm trying to work on getting folks to cover for me. I guess I just needed to make that clear.
yes, so you may not be available.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm not going to ask that we go 7th and 8th, but I would be free there, but I'll try and work on the 9th.
Any other board members have conflicts with those dates or flexibility with those dates?
I'm flexible.
Comments from you, staff?
This meeting is in our hearing room at the Evergreen Building in Sacramento. So 7th, 8th, 8th, or 9th is, either of those is fine for staff.
Are there any board members who could not make the 7th and 8th? Dr. Dominguez, you could make the 7th and 8th?
I could make the 7th and 8th.
So is that a actionable item?
Yeah, absolutely, it's agendized.
So I will move to change our December meeting dates to Wednesday, December 7th, and Thursday, December 8th. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by myself to move the December meeting to December 7th and 8th with a second by Ms. McMillian. Any further board discussion? Any public comment? No, roll call vote, please.
Alicia Beneman,
Aye.
Dale Armstrong,
Aye.
Jesus Dominguez,
Aye, with thanks to my colleagues.
Daniel Drummer,
Aye, and you're welcome.
Katerina Ellaby,
Aye.
Jonathan Urban,
Aye.
Tanya McMillian,
Aye.
7-0, motion carried.
Thank you.
So we'll record that in the calendar, and we'll also update the website, so those dates are reflected this week. Any insight into the 2023 calendar?
Let's look at it. Thank you.
So just a shameless plug for March of next year. We are still looking for a Bay Area school to host the March meeting. So that's a to be determined. I mean, we'll use those specific date ranges, but I won't be able to tell you for sure where we're hosting it at. We hope to make those arrangements and have them, on the calendar for you to adopt at the December meeting.
Why are there 3 dates in June?
I believe that has something to do with the strategic plan.
Yeah, we'll cover that in another agenda item, but that will be the beginning of the 2023 strategic plan. So one day will be designated for strategic planning. Some of you have done that before, so this will be old hat. And for a few of it will be new. Typically, we do the strategic plan on the first day and then board business following that. We kind of blocked out these 3 days, but we're open to any kind of modification. It's enough planning, enough time out in advance. If we needed to move it, we could. And if we felt like 3 days in a row was too much for members and their calendars, we could always move the strategic plan to a separate week or something like that. What I would recommend, however, is by then I would anticipate we might have the ability to do a WebEx hybrid style meeting. But for strategic planning, I would certainly recommend that we do that in person with all members in attendance. It's much more effective. The training unit at DCA Solid will be providing facilitation of that strategic plan, and that's a full day's worth of work.
So we don't adopt the 2023 calendar until December, right? So
We hope that we can at least adopt it by December.
by December.
Yeah.
And so is there any feedback from board members regarding a 3-day meeting and the feasibility of that versus breaking it up to maybe one day in May or another day in July for the strategic planning part and then having our regular board meeting in June?
Because we're intending to have strategic planning in person, to me, it works better to consolidate, to have the 3 days run sequentially rather than breaking it up just for travel purposes, and it makes it a little bit easier that way.
I have a kind of a Plan B alternative to offer. I hesitate to do it this far in advance. It's kind of a Plan B, like a catch-all. We could still do 2 days, one day being strategic plan and one day being board business. It's hard to kind of predict this early on how much board business we'll have. Typically in the past, what we've done, sometimes you might have experienced with Sunset, is we'll take the regular statistical data that we provide and kind of defer it to the next meeting. And we could do that here as well. The one thing that we're always kind of measured and cognizant about is the timelines for enforcement and petitions and those kind of things. And so that one board business day would cover for that. And so the Plan B could still be a 2-day meeting, first day strategic plan, second day board business, but it would be board business light.
If we did board business light, can we still cover the budget?
Of course.
Okay, so let's kind of fill things out between now and December and see where everyone's schedule is and what we can do. Sounds like it'd be optimal to have 3 days so that we weren't trying to crunch for
Absolutely.
time.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
we'll see what everyone's schedule looks like and go from there. And so any board members have any comments about the rest of the dates that are on the 2023 calendar? Okay, any further comment from staff?
No.
All right, let's move on. Well, any public comment? Let's move on to agenda item number 11, Executive Officer's Report.
So as it's agendized in the report, I kind of bullet things out as highlights from the rest of the agenda items that you might be receiving information from the specific units. And so I'm going to start with administrative services. And the first thing that I have to report is bittersweet. But we are saying farewell to our Assistant Executive Officer, Elsa Ibarra. Ms. Ibarra has been a cornerstone for the PTBC, but she has announced her retirement, and she will be leaving us sometime next month. She has served the consumers of this state for over 30 years. She started her career with us at the PTBC in 1990, when we were still known as the Physical Therapy Examining Committee and under the Medical Board of California. She served as Staff Services Manager 1 as the manager over the Consumer Protection Services Unit. And in September of 2020, she was promoted to her most important role with the board as the Assistant Executive Officer. I know that I can speak on behalf of staff and the membership when I say that the PTBC greatly appreciates Ms. Ibarra's years of knowledge, mentorship, dedication, and commitment to the physical therapy consumers of California. We wish Elsa a very happy retirement, and again, bittersweet, and she will be sorely missed. So as part of my normal admin report, needless to say, the PTBC has started the recruitment for a new Assistant Executive Officer, and we hope to fill that position in the coming weeks. Also, as previously reported, we have a few vacancies. On a lighter note, the PTBC has completed the recruitment for the Staff Services Manager over the Consumer Protection Services Unit. And you have already met her, but I'd like to introduce Erica Calderon. Ms. Calderon comes to us from the Medical Board of California, where she served as a manager over the Discipline Coordination Unit. And in her short time with us, she's already demonstrated her skill and experience. She's already become a tenured member of our family, and I'm excited for the members to get to meet her in person today and get to know her. And also, staff has also started the recruitment for 2 full-time analysts in the Application Services Unit. And again, we expect to fill those positions very shortly as well. On to funding. You might remember in my last reports that we were projected in fiscal year 2021 would be kind of a tight year. That would be very close to expending our budget for the first time. Typically, this board's been very fiscally responsible, and we've been able to revert a portion of our budget back into the Physical Therapy Fund every year. This fiscal year, using very conservative projections, we anticipated that we would get very close. Staff have been very diligent in monitoring our expenditures, and I'm happy to say that our worries and caution were much ado about nothing. In fact, we're able to revert a significant amount of money back into the fund almost $240,000.
Wonderful.
Not only much higher than we expected, but more than I can remember ever reverting in a single budget year. Having said that, we'll continue to look at ways to save costs and stay within our yearly budgets. Some of those costs that we anticipated have, some ramifications kind of left over from COVID and those kind of things, but I think it's really more about conservative estimates. And so we're happy to announce that. On to application services, I don't have much to report, but I would highlight that we are starting to see an increase in the PTA applications that we expected because of new PTA programs in the state of California. It's certainly something we'll continue to monitor closely, and I know that April will be scheduling outreach presentations with each new program as soon as possible. For licensing and continuing competency, as you'll see from the materials, while CC staff had been on loan to the applications and licensing unit during the pandemic, that has changed. They've returned back to CC, and they've gotten right back to work. And as you'll see from the materials, conducting audits of licensees as well as recognized approval agencies. For CPS, again, I would just highlight new leadership in the CPS unit, welcoming Ms. Calderon. She and her staff have been working like their old colleagues, and it's been impressive to watch. For outreach, what can I say about outreach without stealing April's thunder too much? We did break some new ground. We recently made our first video for TikTok. We've gotten some positive feedback from that, and we're committed to it now. And so you can expect to see new content from TikTok, but also rebroadcast, if you will, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, just to kind of, do more with less. So, and then to touch on the strategic plan, at our next meeting in December, we will be agendizing the strategic plan and giving the board a final closeout report for our previous strategic plan. And we've already started preparation for the new plan, which we brought to you as an aside meeting at our June 2023 meeting. And I know staff is looking forward to the process and is eager to tackle some new goals and objectives as directed by you all, the board. And that is all I have for the executive officer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Kaiser. Any board comments, questions?
I have a comment. I absolutely love that TikTok. It inspired me to make my own TikTok, so good job.
I won't steal it. I will let April report on that in her agenda item, because there's more to it.
For those of us who don't talk tick, I'm wondering if we could have a demonstration provided.
I think that might be something we could pull off tomorrow. Yeah.
Appreciated.
I just want to give a shout out to Elsa for her years of service on the board. So thank you.
Elsa is at the office right now holding it down for us. But I think it's strategic that she's not here today. So, like I said, it's very bittersweet, but also very well deserved.
Will we get to send her off in December?
She won't be here anymore. Next month is her last month.
Okay.
As an invited guest, as a member of the public,
Is she moving to another country or?
I would be happy to pass on to her that her presence is requested as a guest at the December meeting for sure.
thank you very much.
Great.
How much is the flight to and from Tahiti?
I can tell you that wherever else it will be, a Mai Tai will be served.
Well, congratulations to Elsa. Congratulations to Elsa, and thank you, Elsa, for all your years of service. And she's been with many of us during some ups and downs on this board, and so thank you for all you've done, Elsa. And we would love to have you join us in December.
Here, here.
All right. Agenda item number 12, Consumer and Professional Associations and Intergovernmental Relations Reports. Fsbpt.
Let me pull up. So I'll take Fsbpt because there's some business to be had. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Irvin for joining me at the Leadership Issues Forum in July. I'll just say that he definitely hit the ground running. We were quite the team moving from workshop to workshop, and I've gotten nothing but rave reviews. In fact, they've invited Mr. Irvin to speak on a panel at the education meeting as it pertains to public members. And I'll just ask Mr. Irvin if he has anything he'd like to say.
Nope. California was represented. I can tell you, we got a absolutely awesome executive officer, and I was going to him for some pretty tough questions that the other states had. It felt like one of those conventions from back in the Declaration of Independence days where you have all the states gathered. And obviously, being a junior member, didn't know a lot of the answers, knew some of the answers, but he definitely had to lean on Mr. California. Everybody knew who he was, so had a great time. Appreciate the invite, and California did not disappoint at all. So,
Absolutely. We will be hosting the next Fsbpt 2022 annual education meeting in Anaheim next month, October 28th and 29th. Ms. McMillian and I will be doing an opening presentation to kick the meeting off, so I expect that will be very entertaining. I'll also be sending out one more reminder email to members who would like to attend. I'd love to have all members that are able to attend, and we have taken that into account in the travel budget, so you don't have to worry about that. Part of that $240,000 reversion. That's all I have for Fsbpt, other than we do have some work to do between now and October.
Okay. Dr. Dominguez, are you still serving?
Yes, thank you. I'll be there.
Yeah.
I'll be there starting on
Working with.
Wednesday, wearing a different colored shirt every day. So yeah, I think this is the first time that I've been on the education committee where we're physically going to be somewhere.
Oh, wow.
So,
Oh, that's
yeah.
interesting. I didn't think about that.
So yeah, 3 years, and
I would
last year was,
like
all
to
online.
point that out as just kind of a shameless plug. When we are participating with Fsbpt, there is opportunity to volunteer. And so, thank you to Dr. Dominguez for serving on the Education Committee, Dr. Rubina Amen for serving on the Foreign Education Committee. When that opportunity is there, it really gives us a chance to represent California at a higher level. And I think Fsbpt certainly appreciates the largest state in the union with the largest licensing population participating at that level also. And so even while you may not be a delegate or an alternate delegate, you can still volunteer for committees with Fsbpt, and there are quite a number of them. And there will actually be a booth at the education seminar where you can go look at the description for each committee and what might pique your interest and volunteer. And I would just highly encourage it.
And thank you, Mr. Irvin, for attending LIFE and representing us. Yeah, I'm glad you're able to go. And so I suppose that there will be a new slate to vote on this coming meeting.
It has already been announced, and I believe as delegates and alternate delegates, you've already received those emails. So, yeah. And so they'll be, they had a candidate forum where we heard testimony from each of those members, I believe last month. And I think that there's also one more session the day of the delegate assembly itself. So.
And I suppose just as a board member, I did receive the Fsbpt annual report in my email. I don't know if others received that as well. Yeah, so that's great. And maybe looking forward to next year, we can think about having some California representation put forward for nomination for some of those positions, maybe including you, Mr. Kaiser,
For the directorships?
for directorship.
I believe that there are 2 slated vacancies for next year, and I actually think one of the directorships is designated administrator.
Okay.
So that's certainly an option.
You're involved enough already. You'd be a great voice to represent us from this side and from California specifically. So I love for you to consider that. Maybe we can talk about that more at the December meeting.
Absolutely.
Any other comments on FSBPT? Any public comment? DCA?
So DCA is apologetic in not being able to attend today. There are a number of meetings on the calendar today, and just dealing with COVID pandemic issues and those kind of things. They provided me a update to provide on their behalf, and so I'm going to read it. The first thing as it pertains to COVID-19 in-person meetings, guidelines and safety measures, though legislation has passed following remote meetings or allowing remote meetings, DCA is reminding that all boards and bureau members and staff are expected to follow the state and local public health guidelines that apply in the area where those meetings are being held. Social media brown bag on August 10th, DCA held a brown bag meeting on the topic of social media. The presentation included an overview of social media best practices, content examples, security, and more. A copy of the presentation was provided to participants. If you have any questions or requests related to social media, please contact DCA's Deputy Director of Communication, Monica Vargas. Board leadership meeting, DCA will be holding its fall board leadership meeting on October 11th. These quarterly meetings are attended by board presidents, vice presidents, and executive officers, and DCA executive leaders, and provides an opportunity to discuss important and emerging issues as a group. If you have any suggested agenda items for this upcoming meeting, please send them to the DCA Member Relations email.
Can you please repeat the date?
October 11th.
Thank you. Thank you.
An update on DCA workforce and succession plan. DCA takes a proactive and strategic approach to the recruitment and training of its skilled and diverse workforce. To achieve this approach, DCA is updating its annual workforce and succession plan. As part of this process, DCA recently requested that board and bureau leaders complete a workforce survey. Responses will be used with other information about DCA's workforce to inform decisions that align and support DCA's new strategic plan. Further, this process facilitates meeting CalHR's requirements that all state organizations with civil service employees maintain current workforce and succession plans. There are a few new staff to announce at DCA. DCA is pleased to announce that Nicole Lee was hired on June 24th as the Deputy Director of DCA's Office of Administrative Services. With more than 20 years of state experience, Nicole has dedicated 10 of those years to DCA. Most recently, she served as the Acting Deputy Director of the Office of Administrative Services, where she was responsible for overseeing the business functions of Human Resources, Fiscal Operations, and Business Services offices. Prior to this role, Nicole was Chief of the DCA Office of Human Resources. She also previously served at the Contractor State Licensing Board and the Department of Motor Vehicles. We're very excited to have her as part of DCA's executive leadership team. DCA is also pleased to announce that Olivia Trejo has been appointed as DCA's Chief of Office of Human Resources as of August 1st. Olivia has over 22 years of human resources experience in state government, and the last 9 years have been with DCA's. She began her career in 2000 at the Department of Insurance, when the Department of Real Estate, and most recently as the DCA Assistant Human Resources Chief for nearly 5 years. Taylor Schick was appointed to DCA's Chief Fiscal Officer in July. Taylor has more than 16 years of state service experience, all with DCA. Taylor began his career in 2006 as a budget analyst and most recently as the DCA budget officer. As the new DCA's Chief Fiscal Officer, Taylor will lead the dedicated accounting and budget teams. Additionally, the governor recently appointed a new Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations, Melissa Gear. She will be joining the department in October and brings a wealth of experience. She previously served as the Chief Deputy Legislative Director at the Department of Insurance since 2014. She's also served as at the California State Teachers Retirement System, California Attorney General's Office, and the Legislative Analyst Office. She also earned a Master's of Public Health and Administration degree from New York University, and we look forward to her joining the department and assisting all of our boards and bureaus. And lastly, board members are required to complete board member orientation training within 1 year of appointment and reappointment. The final training of 2022 will be offered on October 12th. Members can register through DCA's learning management system. Board member orientation training is required for newly appointed and reappointed members, but is available as a refresher for all members and executive officers. Reach out to DCA's member relations email with any questions. And I will just say that DCA did stress that they are offering it as a refresher. So if it's something that you'd like to attend, please let me know. I plan on attending the October 11th or the October 12th session myself. And that is the last for DCA's update.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Jason regarding DCA?
That's good.
Any public comment? Okay, we are going to move into agenda item number 13.
I have one more for CPTA.
Oh, sorry, CPTA.
They're not able to join us today because they're in transit and travel for the convention, and some are already there setting up. But this weekend, staff and I will be attending the convention ourselves. We'll be manning a PTBC booth in the vendors area, both Saturday and Sunday. I know some of you may be in attendance as well, so please stop by and say hi. We'd happy to have your representation.
Thank you. Anyone planning to go to CPTA conference?
I will be there.
Yes.
And I don't know that it was said, but we'll be in Anaheim.
Yes, I'm sorry. Just down the road.
Yeah. Dr. Dominguez?
I cannot. I participated in a prepping for a panel discussion, but I cannot make it on Saturday.
Yeah. Anybody else? Dale? Be there Saturday. I'm presenting a poster. I don't know when. I should know when, but I'll find out when, and I'll be there for sure. Yeah, so we'll stop by. And
Excellent.
Hopefully a lot of people will stop by.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Thanks for having a booth there. I think that's a great idea.
We haven't broken the booth out for quite some time. So a year before the global pandemic, so almost 4 years, 3.5 years at this point. So.
Yeah. Okay. Any further board comment or discussion? Any public comment? Okay. All right, now let's move to agenda item 13, which is discussion of possible board action for the increase in the exempt level of the executive officer. So for roughly 5 years now, we've been trying to get the board classified at the level that corresponds to its operations and its budget. And so we have submitted several requests. Thank you to our wonderful Liz for helping us get these packages submitted, put together and submitted, and we have not been successful. Once we were successful, we did move to level N, and so at our December meeting, we decided to move forward again and resubmit, and we did resubmit. I believe we resubmitted in January, like right at the beginning of January. Was it April? Was it later? Okay. So given that it was April, I did get a response. And I got a response from DCA Director Kimberly Kirchmeyer, and that was on Friday the 9th, September 9th. And we did have some success in moving the exempt level to level M. So although we've been at L for some years now, and there is more than enough documentation and objective data that we presented that shows where we truly are. For whatever reason and reasons we may not know, we are now at level M. So what do you say, Ms. Ellaby?
It's been a long time coming.
When you say we've been at L, I think you mean that
I'm sorry.
we fit into that bracket as far as estimated size. So based on our metrics, based on our looking at the complexity of the profession, the size of budget, the size of licensing population, those kind of things, we determined that L was the most appropriate band 5 years ago.
Yes, that is a much better way of saying it. We exist now fitting into the category of L, the level of L. Other board member comment?
perhaps my memory is fatigued on this topic, but it seems like more than 5 years that we have been, I know perhaps it's just this tack, this strategy to move the level has been 5 years, but that we have been working to pursue this for, I believe, my tenure on the board thus far.
I think we've been having this conversation, you're correct, Dr. Drummer, for that length of time. And I'll try to rely on Liz. I think the first official board-adopted request was just over 5 years ago. But we had been having that conversation and strategy, trying to figure out, with the assistance of the Department of Consumer Affairs, how to go about right-sizing the board and its structure. We had ceiling issues, if you will. We weren't growing commiserate to the profession, and they were outpacing us, and as staff was being added, there wasn't enough supervision of staff because I couldn't have a certain amount of supervision underneath that low of a ceiling. So some of those issues have been corrected. We still have some struggles with that, and I think because this profession is not slowing in pace at any level. In fact, for one side of our licensing population, it's increasing significantly. It will still continue to be a bit of a struggle for us.
It's a little difficult to say, huzzah, congratulations to us for achieving a small step. But huzzah.
Huzzah. And I do appreciate your comments, Ms. Ellaby. You know, there's some gratitude for what we do have. And I would like to acknowledge the relatively quick turnaround, if it was indeed April, and this is September. And so that's a faster answer than I think we've ever received.
That's definitely a nice change,
Yes,
absolutely.
so we do appreciate that. And I also want to say that we do very much so appreciate the support of DCA. So DCA has helped us push this package through. They've supported us, and thank you, DCA, for doing that for us. And so we will take M.
We will take M.
We will take M.
There is a bit of housekeeping to do. There was a committee assigned to this task. And so now I think it's up to you as members to determine whether that committee continues to exist or if it should be, there's one vacancy on the committee because we had a board member transfer to another board. But we have to kind of determine what we're going to do with the existence of that committee.
Having just asked and received an exempt level increase, it might be good timing to dissolve the committee at this point and reassess at any time in the future.
If I was to provide the board any advice, I would say dissolve the committee as its existence now. It's something that you can always address later on when it becomes a more urgent matter. And we have been provided direction in the past, in previous rejections, that no report should be expected, no second request should be expected right after you've received an approval of some kind. So, just considering the environment, again, my recommendation would be to dissolve the committee, and it's always something that we can return to at a later date.
And is that President's purview to just dissolve it, doesn't need action?
I believe the creation of the committee was done that way, so I think
was done via motion.
I don't believe it was. That's what I mean. So
It's within the president's authority to establish or abolish committee, so I don't think we need to vote on that.
So we'll abolish the committee today. And again, I just want to say thank you to DCA, to Director Kirchmeyer, to Christine Lawley, and to Nicole Lee, and others who've helped us to obtain level M. Any public comment? All right. And so it is 2:26, and we have Ledge and Reg. I'm just kind of taking the temperature around here. Anyone need a break, or you need a break? Okay. So 2:26, if we can come back at 2:40, that would be great. Okay, thank you. Okay, we are back on record. Time is 2:43, and we're picking up with agenda item number 14, legislation report.
All right, I'm just going to go over some recent and upcoming legislative calendar highlights. The legislature reconvened from summer recess on August 1st, and August 25th was the last day to amend bills on the floor. August 31st was the last day for each house to pass bills, and September 30th is it's actually fast approaching, and that's what we were discussing earlier with our sunset or sunrise bill, and that's the last day for the governor to sign or veto bills. All statutes will take effect January 1st, 2023. I did include a legislative summary in the meeting materials, which includes all of the bills from this legislative session that could potentially impact the PTPC. I'll go ahead and provide a update and summary for each bill. Starting with AB 225, DCA Boards, Veterans, Military Spouses, Licenses. This bill is dead as it didn't pass out of the Senate Appropriations Committee. This bill would have expanded the provisions of the Military Spouse Temporary Licensure Program to apply to military veterans who have been other than dishonorably discharged and active duty military members with orders for separation in 90 days. The next bill is AB 646, DCA Boards, Expunged Convictions. This bill is also dead as it did not pass out of the Senate Appropriations Committee. This bill would have required boards under DCA that post information to their online website. They would have been required to post information about a revoked license when the revocation is due to a criminal conviction, and they'd also be required to update or remove information about the revoked license should the board receive an expungement order related to the conviction. AB 1604, the Upward Mobility Act of 2022, was chaptered on September 13th and will take effect January 1st, 2023. This bill will require all state boards and commissions consisting of one or more volunteer members or commissioners to have at least one volunteer board member or commissioner from an underrepresented community as defined in the bill on or after January 1st, 2023. This bill also further clarifies that new board or commission members should be replaced under these parameters as vacancies do occur. This bill also requires all state agencies who collect demographic information to use separate collection categories and tabulations for specified Black and African American groups. This bill was also, there was a similar bill, I think it was AB 105 that was in the previous session that was vetoed, and then this bill carried through this legislative session and was signed by the governor. The next bill on the legislative summary is AB 1662, Licensing Board's Disqualification from Licensure, Criminal Conviction, and this bill is dead as it did not pass out of the Senate Appropriations Committee. We did have an opposed position on this bill. This bill would have allowed a prospective applicant that has been convicted of a crime to submit a request to a board for a pre-application determination on whether they would be disqualified for licensure. AB 1733, State Bodies Open Meetings, is dead and failed the deadline on August 31st. We did have a support position on this bill. It was an urgency bill, and it would have specified that a meeting held under the Badgley-Keene Open Meeting Act included a meeting held entirely by teleconference remote meetings. We will be discussing SB 189, which was chaptered earlier this session. I believe it was chaptered in June, and that one addresses allowing remote meetings. So I'll go over that a little bit later on in the legislative report. AB 2104, Professions and Vocations, is dead, as it also did not pass out of the Assembly BMP Committee. This bill would have authorized DCA and each board in DCA to charge a fee not to exceed $2 for the certification of a copy of any record, document, or paper in its custody. This bill would have also required the delinquency, penalty, or late fee for any license within the DCA to be 50% of the renewal fee, but not to exceed $150. AB 2600, State Agencies, Letters, and Notices Requirements, is also dead, and as it did not pass out of the Assembly Accountability Administrative Review Committee. This bill would have required that every state agency, when sending any communication, state in bolded font at the beginning of the communication whether it requires action or the part of the recipient or serves as a notice requiring no action. SB 189, State Government, as I mentioned earlier on in my report, was chaptered on June 30th. This bill also, among additional provisions, authorizes state entities to hold public meetings subject to specified notice and accessibility requirements through teleconferencing and making public meetings accessible telephonically or electronically to the public. These provisions do sunset, though, however, on July 1st, 2023.
So I just want to highlight that particular bill. Through our sunset, we tried to pursue the authority to have a WebEx component in addition to our requirements of traveling and doing in-person meetings. This, I think, plays very nicely with that bill. As of July 1st of next year, boards will be required to go back out and travel, right? So that exemption that's being made that allows boards to have remote board meetings in lieu of travel, that authority, the legislature has expressed its intent by saying, yes, given the circumstances and the environment based on the pandemic today, we'll allow boards to do that. However, come July 1, we expect the boards to go back to meeting in person and fulfilling their statutory mandates, similar to ours, where we're required to do a Northern California, a Southern California, and subject to Bailey-Keene. So if you kind of think about it, once that expires July, we go back to the way it was before. If we have to have an emergency meeting, we're back to telephonic means. We're back to, announcing where each of you are somewhere in the state. So the problem is not solved as of yet, right? There's just a temporary Band-Aid at this point.
Was this bill the reason why we were able to hold our August meeting the way we were
Yes.
able to hold it?
Yes.
Is there a sense as to why, what the resistance is to being able to move forward in a, I don't want to say a futuristic way, because
Yeah.
we're in that.
Yeah.
This is our now.
It's our reality
Like,
today.
why is there a resistance to making this an option?
I can only speculate. I think that we have an obligation to provide access to the public. And while WebEx may increase access for some, it might limit stakeholders' ability to meet with us in person in a venue like this. And so what our recommendation was is to do both, right, to increase access in both directions. This legislation that expires in July specifically allows one to supplement the other, right, in
Right.
direct replacement. So the intent, I think, at this point that we can, or at least I interpret from the legislature, is that we do expect boards to make themselves available to their stakeholders, both consumers and licensees, in a typical and traditional fashion with an in-person board meeting. I think the addition of WebEx is kind of a no-brainer, right? I think that really helps us kind of bridge the gap and when it comes to the technology issues. The part that I think still needs a solution is discretion being applied or handed to the boards to make a determination when a WebEx-only meeting is appropriate, whether that's a replacement for a teleconference for enforcement means or something like that, or lack of a venue or late cancellation and rescheduling kind of issue. But I think for us moving forward, we should, I want to encourage this board to kind of listen to the intent of the legislature, and we'll continue our tradition of meeting in person twice a year at a minimum.
And I truly recognize the value, the importance of meeting in person.
Yeah.
I think it far outweighs what can be accomplished on WebEx. Just the feel of a meeting, the way that interaction, discourse happens. I could see the tremendous benefit of having a video screen up in this room for people who cannot be at this meeting.
Absolutely.
And being able to log in, and we, through the use of technical support, we have somebody who's able to interact with those people, allow them to be able to speak as they desire. To me, it doesn't make sense as to why we aren't moving, why we're not there.
So for us, for PTBC particularly, we have some technological limitations in our ability to do that. So we're working on that, and I think that's definitely something that we'll be able to work out within the next year. We're working with DCA kind of to experiment on what a WebEx looks like. To give an example, even during the pandemic, a good majority of the time where we all met online, because our current board president is very local to the office suite, she could come in for the meeting and participate with staff in a very large room setting, communicate with you all in your remote settings from a distance. And I think we can, accommodate that also moving forward. It's just a matter of arranging the technology. Our hearing room at what we call HQ3 doesn't have that equipment provided to it yet. That's just a matter of outfitting that room for it, bandwidth, software, that kind of thing, and the purchasing of the equipment itself. The harder part is when we do something like we are doing today here in San Diego at San Diego Mesa College, what we would call WebEx in a box. Being able to bring that with us on the road is a little bit more difficult. But we'll get there too.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to add much to the conversation, but I think the perceived fear is, oh gosh, this will replace our in-person time. And I think, ultimately the case has to be made that this is what we want to go back to in person, but hey, as an adjunct to increase access to those folks who cannot physically be here wouldn't be such a bad thing. And I think it's just still the perception that nobody, everybody's going to be remote. We're never going to get together physically. So I think once, the case is made, convincingly that this is what we want to do, or us or anybody else, we want it physically or in person. But it would be also great to have the opportunity for folks remotely to attend.
And I think, strategically speaking, I think you made a very compelling argument in your sunset to kind of express that idea that, and that was difficult to do in conversations with staffers at the BMP and, the parties, the powers that will. That we're not trying to replace anything, we're trying to add an additional point of access to each and every meeting, right? So yes, we'll still travel in person, and I think that there is in my kind of looking at it from a distance and trying to detach, that there might be a perception that there is a fear that boards may, regulate from on high in their ivory tower and only provide remote access, and I think that's frowned upon, right? I think that they really do look at this as being a public service, and that we should provide that access at every level possible.
And yet, looking at the public member attendance at this meeting today, I think helps, doesn't help to, it is the argument as to why this should be webcast so that people across the state could be able to participate in the meeting.
Yeah. And at a very minimum, this board has always been Like we have a webcast today, so we are broadcasting, so we do have audience members, but again, they don't have the ability to interact with you as members. When we add that additional web component, that will fix that, right? So we'll try to get to that ideal model. We have been webcasting since 2011, and even then, there were boards, whether it be lack of attendance or lack of attention or that kind of thing, webcasting wasn't available to them. So we've always tried to keep that very kind of open and transparent level of communication with our stakeholders. You could go back and watch some of the 2011 board meetings on our YouTube channel because we really want, our stakeholders to be that engaged and informed. So I agree.
So this bill, 189, would allow us to have a WebEx component if we had the capability right now today,
Yes, it would. Yes, it would.
in addition to meeting in person.
And this bill really only speaks to it as a replacement. We can always add WebEx, right? As an addition, we don't need a legislative authority
Okay.
to do that. But in replacement, right?
Yeah.
In edit to the Bagley-Keene Act, where we would require wherever each board member is sitting to that be a publicly accessible place, ADA accessible, accessible to anybody who might want to participate in the meeting with you at your location. This temporarily pauses that until July 1 of next year. And so we're hoping that there's some kind of, I wouldn't say an extension because I don't think that this statute in and of itself is the solution to the problem. I think we need to look at Bagley-Keene on a higher level and determine what's the best course of action given our technological circumstances, our environmental circumstances, our experience from a global pandemic for that matter, and how we can do it better.
So at our December meeting, our in-person December meeting, DCA representative was there, I think it was Mary Kate Cruz. And I had asked if DCA would look at outfitting HQ3, and you said, well, we've been having those talks are ongoing. And so do you have any updates?
So we have a, what I would consider kind of a Band-Aid for that situation as well. We've created a media cart that we can take down to the Evergreen hearing room, and it has a large panoramic camera so we can kind of sweep across the room and zoom in on each individual member. But in that screen, fairly large screen, you'll be able to see those members who are participating from home. Like I said, it's not ideal. I'd like multiple camera angles. I'd like cameras installed into the walls, an audio system and a video system that can accommodate the load, and maybe a screen that is a little bit more appropriate for the venue, right? So bigger to allow for more participation, and we will continue to rely on Solid and our staff to provide facilitation to those meetings to kind of screen those things through. To Dr. Drummer's point, the Medical Board of California has been doing a telephone call-in line for virtual participation for a very long time, well before the pandemic for that matter. And I would say that that's not something that I would encourage. I think the WebEx participation has proven to be much more engaging for the stakeholder and much more productive for the members of each individual board too. I think there's a better two-way communication that occurs as a result of that video and audio. The telephone, I think, is going to have to be one of those, if that's the only thing you can do, situations to allow for it. The minimum, if you will.
So do you have an update on DCA's progress for updating HQ3? I mean, we have our own Band-Aid, but...
So the Media Cart Band-Aid is a collaboration between us and DCA. The equipment is ours, but the development of the facilitation and creating the bandwidth in the room, we're doing in collaboration with the Department of Consumer Affairs. Once we get that situated, then we can start talking about an inventory for the room. What are the ideal positioning for cameras and speakers and microphones and all of those things. We have a beautiful hearing room in HQ3. Arguably, I think it's nicer than HQ1 and HQ2. And so we'd like to be able to use it for our business, but also for the other boards and bureaus that are within the Department of Consumer Affairs, not only at the HQ3 location. We have the option of taking our board meetings to HQ2, and HQ1 for that matter, and doing a hybrid. The location is across town. It's not ideal. And again, I think it's a bit experimental, and I'd rather see us kind of make HQ3 as much of a staple as 1 and 2 are. And so we can expand the calendar for all the different boards and bureaus to schedule, because there's 38 boards and bureaus within DCA. And if we're all scheduling our board meeting calendars like we are here today, we'll end up fighting for venues when we're staying home.
So is it your intention to have the WebEx component in December?
It was my intention to have the WebEx component today. So yes, we'll just see how successful we are.
Thank you.
No, just a comment. I do remember, this was before the pandemic, we had a sort of an urgent matter where we called a teleconference meeting, and I happened to be in my office, so we all gave our addresses, and I had an interested party come in, because he, at the time, he wanted to see what one of these board meetings was like, and he was there for a whole 3 minutes before we had to go into closed session. So
yeah, there are
drive.
some logistical issues that I also think would be solved by WebEx too, right? I mean, in those situations, just looking at the agenda, the public can decide which portions of the meeting that they're most interested in. The other thing that some members here at this panel might remember is some of the nightmare issues with teleconferences, where if you just had, a slight transposition of an address number, that we basically have to cancel the meeting and repost and reschedule it, so under Bagley-Keene. So WebEx is definitely a much better option, and we'll continue to strive for that.
Other board member comments? Any public comment? Thank you, Brooke.
All right. SB 250, healthcare coverage. This bill is dead, as it did not pass out of the Assembly Appropriations Committee. Amongst additional provisions, this bill would have granted a physician and surgeon the right to have an appeal of a prior authorization decision conducted by a physician and surgeon of the same or similar specialty, and would have prohibited a plan or insurer from requiring an appeal of an adverse prior authorization request result to be filed before filing an independent medical review. SB 731, criminal records relief. This bill was enrolled and presented to the governor on August 26th. This bill would expand felonies that are eligible for automatic record sealing to include convictions for certain felonies that resulted in incarceration, as long as the individual had completed their sentence and had not been convicted of a new felony offense for 4 years. SB 1031, Healing Arts Board's inactive license fees, is dead, as it did not pass out of the Senate Appropriations Committee. This bill would have required the renewal fee for an inactive license to be 1/2 of the fee for a renewal of an active license, unless the board established a lower fee. SB 1237, licenses military service, was chaptered on September 17th. This bill will require the boards within DCA to waive the renewal fee for any licensee or registrant who is called to active duty as a member of the United States Armed Forces or the California National Guard if the licensee or registrant is stationed outside of California. SB 1365, licensing boards procedures, is dead and did not pass out of the Senate Appropriations Committee. This bill would have required all boards to post a list of criteria used to evaluate applicants with criminal convictions on their website. And then, of course, SB 1438, Physical Therapy Board of California, as Mr. Kaiser reported on earlier. It's our Sunrise bill, and we have a support position on this bill. The bill was enrolled and presented to the governor on September 9th, and he has until the 30th to pass this bill, and it would extend the operations of the PTPC until January 1st, 2027, and would extend the board's authority to appoint an executive officer until January 1st, 2027. And in addition, this bill would authorize physicians and surgeons to conduct an in-person or telehealth patient examination and evaluation of the patient's condition in connection with their approval of the PT's plan of care. So we'll be.
Just one, the only thing that I would add for SB 1438, and I think it's just for information's sake and worst case scenario, should September 30th come and the governor not sign the bill, by operation of law, the bill would just go into effect, right? Without receiving a veto of any kind, without receiving his signature, those laws will just become a matter of process and operational law. So.
And the last bill on the legislative summary is SB 1495, Professions and Vacations, and this bill was enrolled and presented to the governor on September 9th. This is the omnibus bill for the Senate B&P Committee. This bill does make numerous technical and clarifying provisions related to programs within DCA and deletes a few obsolete cross-references in the B&P code as well. Were there any additional questions on the legislative report? So we currently have 4 rulemaking packages in progress, and we are very happy to report that there's been a great deal of forward progress with our regulations. Both the coursework tool and the performance evaluation tool initial rulemaking packages were approved by agency, and they were filed with OAL and published on August 5th for their 45-day public comment period, which commenced on September 20th. So that was yesterday. We'll be working closely with DCA's regulation unit on submitting the final rulemaking packages to DCA very soon. Thus far, we have not received any adverse comments on those packages. The retired license status regulation was approved by agency on June 6th, and it was filed with OAL and published on June 17th, and the 45-day comment period ended on August 2nd. We did receive comments on this package, and the board will need to respond to the comments in the final rulemaking package, and we will be presenting those comments under agenda item 16 for further detail and consideration. For the continuing competency regulations, we're still in the concept phase and anticipate bringing proposed language hopefully at the December meeting forthcoming. Were there any additional questions on the rulemaking report before we move to agenda item 16?
The guidelines package was approved January?
It went into effect April 1st. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Comments from board members? Threads are moving. And thank you, Brooke, for the chart, the flow chart, what we call that. But that's very helpful. Very, very helpful. Public comments? Let's move to agenda item 16.
So as I discussed in the reg report, the retired license status regulations 45-day public comment period did commence on August 5th. A number of comments were received, which were provided in the meeting materials on page 69 for the board's consideration. So according to the Administrative Procedure Act's requirement for enacting regulations, the board must consider each comment, and in the final rulemaking package, we create a final statement of reasons. And when we prepare that, each comment is summarized and responded to. We received 2 categories of comments. The first was a dissatisfaction with paying a $100 fee for retired status. And the second was expressing confusion if current licensees in retired status would be required to pay the fee to remain retired. We have prepared potential responses to each of the categories of comments for the board's consideration and approval. Both of the draft potential responses provided are from the initial rulemaking package's initial statement of reasons. So both of those summaries do come from the initial statement of reasons, which was provided to the public during the 45-day public comment period. And then in addition, there is a potential motion included in the briefing paper if the board would like to pursue moving forward with filing this regulation with OAL and continuing on with the regulatory process.
You want to say something, Mr. Kaiser?
Not quite yet.
Okay, so I will say, just for transparency to the public and for better understanding of all of us, maybe we should look at the second category of concern, which is the concern for those who are already in retired status. And Brooke, if you don't mind just reading out the verbiage that was already put together as potential response.
Of course. So the board's potential response to the grandfather comment? For those that currently hold a license in retired status and have inquired if they would need to pay a fee and complete the new application form, the initial statement of reasons, page 1, stated that by the end of fiscal year 2020-2021, the board has issued retired status to 537 of its 43,570 licensees. Those 537 licenses have already been processed as retired. Therefore, those licensees would be exempt from the provisions of this regulatory proposal and no additional form or fee would be required. Because those licenses need nothing further, the board has determined that no text changes are required in response to these comments. To the extent that the comment implies that the regulatory text is vague, the board notes that the regulation, once enacted, is prospective only, so would not affect any status already in effect.
Thank you. So I feel like this particular issue is much more clear than the first issue. So just want to make sure board members understand and are in agreement with this response, or if not, if you have any additional edits or suggestions that we should discuss.
I think the biggest challenge is a lack of understanding of what my license status is and what the term associated with my license status, what that means. My personal license is currently active, means that I'm able to continue to actively practice physical therapy and provide services. I think the challenge is that a large number of licensees don't understand that when they stop practicing and they no longer renew their license, it's put into inactive status, correct?
No, so inactive status is a status that a licensee would have to actually apply for. If they are simply late and they have not renewed their license, their status would move to what we say is delinquent. So inactive status is actually a choice. You would go into it for whatever reason the licensee might have at the time. They would still have to pay a fee because they're still what we would consider a continual renewable license and still under the board's jurisdiction. They'd be prohibited from practicing, but they would also be, they wouldn't have to fulfill any continuing education requirements or anything like that. The statuses can be confusing across the board.
And that, I think, is the challenge. Mm-hmm. So my misuse of the word inactive just now is example that it's delinquent, so if I stop practicing, I stop voluntarily renewing my license, correct, it moves to delinquent status. In many people's heads, delinquent is not a good term.
Has a negative connotation.
Has a negative connotation. But that simply means that my license is
late.
I'm done.
You're late.
That I'm done. That I haven't paid, I haven't renewed. But in all essence, I'm done practicing.
Yeah.
So I can retire from the profession and my license will read as delinquent, but it just means that I'm no longer playing the game.
Exactly. And just to take it one step further, should a licensee choose to stay within that delinquent status for up to 5 years, the status would change one more time and it would move to canceled. The other thing about delinquent is it is a period of time that is renewable. So you could be delinquent for up to 5 years, and as long as you submitted a renewal within that 5-year range, you could bring your license back to active. The
And-
bad side of that is in delinquent, you would owe back fees. You'd owe those previous renewals up to that point, in addition to one delinquent fee. So over a 5-year period, we're talking in the areas of over $1,000, right?
And as a physical, if I'm moving into that level, I'm stopping work, I'm not going to work anymore, that could very easily be an okay thing for me to do, because I'm not
Absolutely.
planning to go back to work.
Absolutely.
I'm letting it go.
And you don't practice within the state jurisdiction.
And I don't practice within the state of California. I think that where a lot of people are not understanding what retired status means is a piece of the challenge,
Yeah.
because it has its own definition. So I don't know, clearly there needs to be a bigger education push so that people do understand what this is about, potentially something for the next newsletter. A table that
Yeah.
could hopefully simply explain what the status is and what it's moving to, because many of these comments
Yeah.
clearly, to me, address a need for really just education about where things are going, what the options are.
Dr.
I have a
Armstrong?
question about the delinquent status and being able to renew up to 5 years. What happens to continuing education requirements?
That's an excellent question. So while a licensee, so there's a couple things that could play out in delinquent status. Sometimes it's intentional, and sometimes it's just a point of negligence, right? Essentially, when a licensee renews their license, on their coupon for renewal, they are attesting under penalty of perjury that they are in compliance with the continuing competency regulations, meaning that they've collected 30 hours within that renewal cycle. Once that license moves to delinquent, and for any length of time, they have not renewed their license. When they come out of delinquency, they're going to be attesting that they have that 30 hours over the last 24 months. So if they wait 2 renewal cycles and they come back in the 4th year, we advise them when they call in, they say, what do I need to do to renew my license? We do the calculation and the math of how much money they would have to pay. And we advise them when they fulfill that requirement, when they sign that agreement, they are attesting under penalty of perjury that they've collected that 30 hours within the last 2 years so that it's current and relevant. To Dr. Drummer's point, as far as outreach and coordination, I think it's a great idea for a newsletter. And I think what we would just capitalize on it as a point of education further, right? So we would put it in the newsletter, but it would be something that we could reference from that point moving on when we're discussing this with licensees. So that's something that we'll certainly look into. As far as the different statuses themselves, we're kind of confined by both statute and system and culture and custom. So based on some of the comments that you'll see here, especially when it comes to the grandfathering idea, one of the other kind of difficulties for us at PTBC is that retired status was not new to us when we received this statutory authority. We had our own retired authority for a period of time. In fact, we were promulgating regulations to clarify that retired status when a larger statutory bill was provided to the whole department. And we looked at it, and it was better. It was more comprehensive. It gave more options both for us and for the licensee. And so we said, you know, as part of our last sunset in 2016, we're going to ask that our statutory authority for retired sunset, as we were going to take advantage of the department-wide statute. Here we are years later, and we're finally getting the regulation done. The explanation that's being provided here, while it affects a small number of people in the 500s, until that regulation is completely finished its promulgation, people can apply for retired status in that kind of point of limbo. So we want to make sure that they understand grandfathering doesn't affect them if they already have retired status. No further action is needed on their part. They're not required to pay a fee of any kind. The one thing that I think that we can make a point of clarity in the FSR, the final statement of reasons with the package, is for those folks, once this regulation goes to effect, essentially a a 5-year clock starts for them. So from the point of that regulation hitting the books, they'll have 5 years of retired status, and at such time 5 years expires, it'll switch to retired canceled. And what we're really trying to do is kind of address a badge of honor for those that have provided service for a very long time and, to Daniel's point, don't like the negative connotation of the word delinquent or canceled for that matter, because canceled sounds very bad too, especially for somebody who's so tenured. So retired status is an option, but it's certainly not something that we're mandating anybody use.
Having a little bit better connotation, understanding of what the terminology means, I will gladly wear my badge of inactive or delinquent and canceled when that time comes.
Just a counterpoint that I might use to change your mind. For that 5 years after the point of either delinquent or retired, you have different circumstances. If you are delinquent and you choose to return within that 5 years, as we've discussed, you could have a pretty hefty amount of money to have to pay to come back to current. But if you're going to be a Michael Jordan or a Brett Favre and come out of retirement, retired can save you money. You could pay the $100 to go into retired, and in 4 years come back and only pay what the renewal fee is at that point. No delinquency fees, no current, no retirements in the back. And I think it also provides a clearer record for the consumer as well, right? It's a better descriptor than delinquent or canceled.
With the understanding that I doubt that I will ever be a multi-million-dollar professional athlete. Thanks.
So Jason, can you help us understand then how inactive fits in?
So inactive is really about continuing education, right? So when a licensee receives their renewal notice and they read that disclaimer that we're talking about that they have to attest to under penalty of perjury, they're basically saying, I'm in compliance. If they're not in compliance with continuing education, if they come to the realization that they don't have the 30 hours, they have an alternative. We mail these coupons out 90 days in advance of their expiration, so they already have a little bit of time. Frankly, it's quite easy for licensees to get 30 hours of content within a 90-day period of time. If they don't, and they get to that point of expiration, they can choose inactive status. Inactive status is still the $300 renewal fee. Your license is still in good standing with the board. However, you're prohibited from practicing, and you're exempt from your continuing education requirements. If you wanted to return to practice, you would have to file an application going from inactive to active status. And similar to the explanation that I gave Dr. Armstrong, they would have to attest of having that 30 hours in the previous 2 years.
Thank you. And I'm wondering if this is a big enough issue for an e-blast. That's something we can consider.
As part of a newsletter, it would be e-blasted.
Okay, in the newsletter.
So that's definitely, yeah, absolutely. And depending upon the tool that we're talking about and the visual that we're able to create, it might also occupy space on the board's website, and it might be used in social media, and it might be used in assistance to help educate the licensing population of the change of this regulation.
Okay, and so further comments or questions?
Yeah, just more of a question, I guess. So I like Dr. Drummer's point here in sort of educating the public. So I was just sort of doing a quick little search here on PTBC website, medical board. There doesn't seem to be a place where I can go and figure out all the different license statuses. And if that doesn't take up too much real estate on the website.
Yeah, I think that, and that's kind of what I was alluding to, is that we would also find a place for it on the website. The one place that consumers and even licensees can find these definitions is when they go to verify either their own license through DCA search or the license of another professional. And there are hover-overs, right? So when you see in a license verification what the status is for that particular licensee, you just mouse hover over, as an example, current active, and it will provide a small paragraph of a description, the same as that you would have with current, delinquent or inactive and retired. And after this regulation is created, retired canceled.
And that's within Breeze.
No, that's actually within, it's fed by Breeze, but it's a total standalone website. It's called DCA Search, search.dca.ca.gov. You can reach it in one click from our website, ptbc.ca.gov, and it's just merely for consumers and licensees to verify the license of any other professional within the Department of Consumer Affairs. It's what we would like to direct everyone to because it's such a valuable tool. You can use it to verify somebody by name, by license number. You can even use it to do aggregate searches based on county or residence or those kind of things, and they'll provide you a list. You can search partial names, and it will give you the best that it can find. It really is kind of the best tool we have when it comes to license verification.
Other board member discussion? Comments? Any public comment? And so again, I think maybe taking issue number 2 with grandfathering in those who are already retired, if you look at that language in your agenda materials that Brooke just read, does anyone have any questions or comments about that potential response? Or does that potential response look good to the board members to send out to those who are getting grandfathered in? That is on page 68.
The only thing I would add to that is that the 2 responses that are proposed to you in the briefing paper have been created and vetted by both our analysts and Heather Hoganson, who is the regulations attorney assigned to us at DCA.
Thank you. And so the proposed motion would include both of the potential responses?
Correct.
So let's take that response that Brooke read. Anyone have comments about that, or edits or suggestions? So I feel comfortable with that one. That's why I wanted to take that one first. I feel real comfortable with that one. And not that I don't feel comfortable with the other one, but I think that might take a little more discussion. So,
So just to clarify, you're referring to near the bottom of agenda book, page 68, board's potential response to grandfather comment?
correct.
Okay.
And just a point of clarity, these responses would be in the package addressing each individual comment that fit in those 2 categories. There will be additional language in the final statement of reasons where we have opportunity to address any kind of concerns. But these are specific to those requests that we received during the 45-day comment period.
I'm guessing attorneys were involved in drafting of this language?
Yeah, that's hard to avoid in regulation.
It's,
No offense, Mr. Knotts.
None taken.
good.
And you just said Heather took a look at these.
So these are actually crafted by a combination of staff and Heather Hoganson.
Okay.
So they are drafted for the purposes of the Office of Administrative Law to address the comments in the package. So there is some necessary legalese, if you will.
What say you, Dr. Drummer?
It's just, it's challenging to read and to understand.
Would it, so again.
But
this-
I don't know that there's a way around it.
Yeah. Well, I think there might be a happy medium, though. I think for the purposes of addressing the language in the regulatory package, I understand these responses, and I think that they're necessary. I think that's just kind of the way it works out. But I also think there's a potential for us to address kind of your broader concerns with, one, the visual aid that we were talking about, but also FAQs, where we can actually write the question in kind of a simplistic, more user-friendly way. What if I'm already retired? And we can provide an explanation that somebody that doesn't hold, a Juris Doctorate, that they can understand it.
and as example, moving to page 69, the PTC's response on June 28th to an individual. Plain English, simple to understand, especially to
Yeah.
to somebody
Yeah.
who is asking the question, who probably doesn't have
Yeah.
who doesn't have a good understanding of what statuses mean and where they're going.
Yeah.
To me,
Yeah. Well, and I hope that as members, you kind of find solace in that those responses have already been given to these requesters, right? These were the examples of the communications that were kind of back and forth. But while somebody may not have taken the time to address this regulation in the comment period, our staff are still fielding these kind of phone calls and email communications on a daily basis. So they're very, well versed in how to kind of express to them the quickest, easiest to understand verbiage, written communication, what have you, when it comes to things like the statuses. Because like I said, across the board, the statuses can be confusing. To add to that, you could be duly licensed in other states where the statuses mean completely different things or they use completely different terminology. And we have a lot of traveling PTs and PTAs in California, so it can be very confusing. So we do what we can to translate.
So responses directly to the inquiries and questions are similar to what we see as an example there in
Yes.
plain language.
Yeah.
The language drafted by Heather and others is really our written response that's going to accompany these statements.
Within the
in our-
regulatory package.
Yes, in our reg
Yeah.
package. What do you think, Dr. Drummer?
I think I've said enough.
And we appreciate it. I think that helped us. That helped us all. It's nice to know that people are getting their questions answered and they can understand what's being said to them.
And if they're listening right now,
Yeah.
or they watch this YouTube cast, they're going to get the same explanation, so it's beneficial.
Okay, are we ready to move on to the first issue? So let's look at the first issue.
Would you like me to read that?
Yes,
one?
that'd be, well, let's talk about some of the questions maybe that came up that fit in this category. I guess it is the dissatisfaction at the $100 fee. So this is the response. Okay. All right, go ahead, Brooke, please. Thank you.
Okay. At the September 2021 board meeting, the board approved the $100 fee based upon the time spent processing such applications. After conducting a desk audit and based upon prior experience in processing prior retirement applications, the time to process was determined to be 95 minutes. This number was listed in the initial statement of reasons, page 5. While based on current costs, this results in a charge of $101. The board set the fee at a rounded down $100. And then it includes the 95-minute breakdown as follows. And then according to this SAM, the state must recover costs unless those costs are otherwise limited by statute. SAM Section 8752 was renumbered to 9210 in January 2022. But the onus on state to recover all costs attributable directly to the activity plus a fair share of indirect costs, which can be ascribed reasonably to the good or service provided, remains unchanged. BPC 464 subdivision B4 states that a board shall establish an appropriate application fee for a retired license to cover the reasonable regulatory cost of issuing a retired license. The board does not receive general fund money from the state. It collects fees to offset the cost of its activities. Therefore, not charging for work done from licensees in one category would require licensees in another category to shoulder that burden, such as through increased renewal fees. To be equitable, only those who are requesting a specific work product, such as retired license, should bear the burden of that specific cost. AB 2859, which provided for retired status under BPC 464, recognized that many licensees disfavor becoming simply inactive or delinquent. However, as the board noted in its initial statement of reasons, choosing to request a retired license is an option for licensees. If a licensee does not want to pay for and receive a retired status, they could simply not renew their license and show as inactive until the license automatically cancels after 5 years.
Okay, I have a question.
Actually, so do I, kind of. I think in that last paragraph, in the last sentence, to the discussion that Dr. Drummer and I were just having, inactive in quotes should be delinquent.
Yes.
I understand the regulation attorney's interpretation, but again, I think it does cause confusion for the stakeholders and licensees, mincing words between delinquent and inactive. Again, inactive being a purposeful state that you may request to enter into, and still having to pay that full fee. So I would recommend replacing, in that, at least in that sentence and explanation, the word inactive with delinquent.
And inactive requires an action.
It does.
To move into inactive status.
Correct.
Where delinquent requires no action.
Right. It's going to happen if you lack action. If you do nothing, you will move into delinquent status.
So I think that subtle difference is important to note as well.
Yes. How about in the first sentence, Mr. Kaiser? Where it says, the first sentence of that paragraph, recognize that many licensees disfavor becoming simply inactive or delinquent. Should inactive be removed there?
I think it's okay there. I don't know that the use of quotes really needs to be expressed in, but there we have had, and I have had multiple conversations with licensees that don't like the idea of either inactive, delinquent, or canceled, right? All of those things have some kind of negative connotation, and that conversation, Ms. Ellaby's kind of giggling at me right now, so multiple conversations, and each person having their own kind of unique take on, I don't like canceled, I don't like inactive, or I don't like delinquent. And again, so retired is kind of a proposed solution to suffice those folks and pay homage to their service, you know, at the same time. And I think, you know, again, to Dr. Drummer's point, I think the only way to really make this as understandable as possible for everyone involved, we're going to have to boil it down to some kind of visual,
Yes.
right? So we'll have to experiment with what that is. Here in that sentence, I think with Heather's explanation, I think inactive or delinquent is still appropriate. I think that last sentence needs to be consistent.
I'm having a hard time with inactive in the first sentence because it doesn't have anything to do with retired.
And so similarly, I think if replacing in the last sentence inactive with delinquent, I think you could do the same thing in the beginning. You could take inactive out because, to Daniel's point, it's subject to action. They would have to choose it, and they're still going to have to pay the $300 renewal fee, right? This really is an opportunity for them as kind of a reprieve or a period of time for them to get their continuing competency and just come back.
Right.
So it really is nomenclature, right? I think inactive is just used improperly in this paragraph.
Yeah,
It should be
I think so.
delinquent, for clarity's sake.
I mean, someone who's going to retire is either going to choose retired status or let their license go delinquent. But they won't choose inactive because they want to not practice.
To your point, and very well taken, no. I do have licensees, again, discussions that are moving out of state, and they don't want to have to battle with, you know, doing continuing competency regulations for one state and another and that kind of thing. So they will use an active status because they don't want to really end their career in California. There's a potential that they might return. And so as long as in another renewal, they can switch from inactive to active and attest that they have 30 hours over the last 2 years, they can return. It makes it much easier for them. But they don't have to worry about collecting that or becoming subject to an audit and then not having anything to prove for California. So again, purposeful for the use of continuing competency, but not so much for somebody who, you know, wants to leave the profession maybe undecidedly in retirement.
except in the case of the Physical Therapy Board, which already had a retired status capable. If we took that out of the picture, then I think that paragraph reads absolutely appropriate. If we pretend that we don't have retired, and I'm choosing to stop practice, but I don't want to, I would go to inactive for a period of time because I might come back. Since we have retired status, and this is to this AB 2859 was intended to create retired status where boards didn't have it. Our challenge, one of our challenges is that we had something already on the books, and now we're trying to get this variation to fit better.
But to your point, because this statute was effective for all of the Department of Consumer Affairs, there were other boards that did have, similar to us, did have some kind of retired authority, some who didn't have anything at all, but they're still faced with the same complexities that we're talking about today because they still have issues with things like the difference between delinquent and canceled and inactive and so forth. So we're not alone in that frustration, but I think we can also kind of take some of these conversations and craft what we think is a good, PR campaign, essentially, to try to educate the licensees.
So if we get back on track with this particular paragraph, we are proposing to remove the word inactive in that first sentence?
And replace, just removing it altogether.
Inactive and then also change inactive in the last sentence to delinquent.
Correct. Because that more clearly expresses our intent moving from one statute to another and the negative connotation issue that licensees have with delinquent.
Okay. And so have board members had an opportunity to read some of the concerns and questions that were sent in, and do you have any thoughts, comments, edits regarding the board's proposed response for this issue of dissatisfaction of the $100 fee for a retired license?
Well, looking at number one, I think it's an easy education piece, just as we've been talking about. Like, I shouldn't have to pay anything to retire. Like, you don't. You don't have to.
Right.
And here's why. I think it's the perfect place to use what we've just been talking about.
And that could be said for a number of these that were sent in, so.
Yeah, several have a similar theme.
That's why we group them into the two different categories, one being the grandfathering issue and then the other just the dissatisfaction with a fee of any kind, for that matter. I think we anticipated in previous discussions that establishing any fee is going to have some pushback. And we had those discussions.
Yeah.
We provided to you kind of the audit of how we came up with the fee. DCA budgets looked at it and also saw it as being appropriate. It's not unusual in the department for, especially after this statute went into effect, and some boards have promulgated regulations since, that it's similar, about anywhere from a half to a third of the renewal price would be what a retired status would be. I think the important part for us to keep in mind is that retired is still a renewable license. And just that idea of delinquent, retired serves a purpose. It could save a licensee quite a bit of money should they change their mind before they went to retired canceled. And really, in the reality of things, if you went to retired canceled, when you return, you're only paying the initial application fee at that point. None of the previous delinquent renewal fees would be collected anyway. So it's really about when and if they choose to return from retirement, that they can kind of, decide what they pay or not pay, right? Using retired, they pay a $100 one-time fee. If they come back, they just pay whatever the current renewal fee is at the time that they return.
So this is a silly question. Do they get anything for retirement, like a plaque or anything? They get nothing for their money? Okay. I'm very fee averse, and I think,
Sure.
you pay to get in, and you got to pay to get out. I just think, especially if they don't get a plaque, like if we're overcharging for a plaque, maybe we can sell a fee. It's like, hey, I got
Yeah.
this plaque. Do they have to send it back if they come back?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they get to keep the plaque, but if you get nothing to retire, I think at least we should have something that we send them,
Well,
some swag, right?
I'm fee adverse as well, right? And so one of the things I've said openly is that before I retire, I will reduce a fee, right? That's one of the things I will do. Having said that, we've given you kind of a cost estimate of where we came up with it. And there's one thing that's actually not included in the cost estimate. We broke it down to just the processing and the time involved in kind of talking somebody through the retired process. It doesn't speak to the fact that it's a renewable license. They still fall within the jurisdiction of the board. If we received a subsequent arrest notification, we'd still have to conduct an investigation. If we received a consumer complaint, we would still have to conduct an investigation. And so similar to the renewal fees, that's what we use to sustain the board. And so we've reduced their contribution to sustaining the board, but the risk that they provide is still there, right? We could still get a complaint from them. We could still get a subsequent arrest. And I guess most importantly to the point, and this is a fee thing and totally a fee thing, if they use delinquent instead and they just choose not to do anything, when they return to come back, they'd have a lot more money to have to pay, right? They'd have to pay all of those renewal fees up to that point plus a $150 delinquent fee. Retired is kind of a deal. Retired is a $100 administrative fee. You get your badge of honor. If somebody looks you up on the website, they see the word retired. They don't see that negative connotation of delinquent or canceled, confusion alleviated. To your point, Mr. Irvin, a certificate.
Give them something. I mean, that gives us an argument. Hey, I'm retired, I get nothing.
So, to clarify, when I retire, I'm done. It means that I'm done. I don't have to pay anything. If I want to maintain retired status with the board so that in case I change my mind and I want to come back in 2 years, my license status can more easily be adapted back to an active status from retired, and more cheaply than it can be if I go to delinquent, because I just didn't pay fees. But when I choose to retire and I'm done, it doesn't cost me anything.
Oh, track. So this is just
Totally optional.
totally optional. Okay.
Yeah. So to the comments that we received, if some of those folks are risk adverse like we are and they don't want to pay the fees, there's nothing that requires them that they have to do so. They would just move to that delinquent status. Again, they might not like the word delinquent. They might not like the word canceled when it comes about. But those words are purposeful for the consumer, right? If somebody verifies the license of a PT who may be practicing unawares that they're even delinquent, which sometimes happens, at least that consumer can then bring that to the board's attention. So we are really kind of battling some of the definitions, but they're all very necessary.
If the PT decides to volunteer or provide pro bono care once they've retired, what does that look like? If they're delinquent, they're not allowed to practice at all, correct?
And if they're retired, they're not
They're
allowed to practice
okay,
at all.
So
Right.
if they want to practice even voluntarily, they need an active license.
They need an active license. And one of the things that we very clearly kind of talked about in our previous discussions is that retired really is just a replacement for the word delinquent. A less, the lack of a negative connotation, but they both act very similarly. What we're actually proposing is that retired's cheaper, right? The fee is significantly cheaper than delinquent would be.
It's cheaper
Because it
if
takes
down the
action.
road you decide to come back.
Absolutely.
That's when it's cheaper.
Yep.
If you know that you're not coming back, if I know when I'm retired, I'm done, that's it, cord is cut, it doesn't cost me anything. If I decide I want to come back later, then it's more expensive if I didn't maintain retired status.
How many people actually come back from retired? Is there a lot of folks that do that?
It's a very good point, because one of the reasons why we're promulgating this regulation is to kind of deter the misuse of the word retired, right? So one of the things when we had this void between our old authority and this new authority is we would have people go into retired status and a couple months later come out of retired status. And it created quite an administrative burden on staff to kind of process these requests that were really not necessary. They were just either a confusion point, and it might be negative, it might be kind of a pessimistic way for me to look at it as the administrator, or they might be somebody who was trying to find a loophole to avoid paying fees, right? They used that retired status to manipulate their fees. And so this is another reason that we're trying to promulgate the regulation.
Having talked to some retirees in PT, I know that practicing for 30, 40 years and then stopping
It's hard.
is not an easy thing. And they might be away. They might say, no, I'm done. And they leave. They drop out for a couple of months or 6 months. And then they, like, I can't do this. I got to get back. There's a drive to need to continue to want to provide service, to practice. And so I can understand how some people would have that desire, would want to come back. So it's not necessarily an easy thing to retire when you think that you're ready, but you're not.
Tom Brady.
So here comes Jason peeking around the corner for $100. You could. So I get it. I get it now.
It's an alternative, right? It's either the $100 to go retired, or, and I've had this discussion, and I don't actually like to have this discussion because, to Daniel's point, you may have somebody who has 30 years of experience, has decided to leave the profession, steps away for 2 to 3 years, and for whatever reason decides to come back, and maybe presses the issue enough that it raises to the level where they talk to me, and we have to talk through why they're being charged 2 renewal cycles, right? So now we're at $600. Plus the delinquent fee that's mandated by the SAM manual, right? So we're at $750 that they have to pay just to come back. And there's really no way to get around it. I mean, without me violating the SAM manual, or them waiting a little bit longer. If they waited 2 more years, they could just reapply and only pay, the $400 to $500 it takes to get an initial license for the first time. It's just really kind of an unfortunate kind of sequence that some of these, and again, relatively small group of people.
Yeah. As I read the comments, I actually, for the most part can empathize with some of them, with the $100 fee, regardless of what their rationale is. So I grappled with it, and I thought, to your point, Mr. Kaiser, about the oversight that we still have, should we get a report, and that we would have to open an well, not have to, but, there may be an investigation and other charges. I thought, okay, well, we can't simply let that burden possibly lie on the licensees who are just renewing and joining. So I think that's how I felt that this was justified. And $100 flat, not every once in a while.
That's a
flat.
good point. It's flat. They'll never hear from us again,
Yeah,
right? So after they file retirement, we won't contact them every 2 years to ask them if they'd like to renew. With their delinquent, we might. And again, it doesn't accrue. It doesn't collect over time. If they, within the 5-year period after that, decide to come back, whatever the new renewal fee is, or the existing renewal fee if it hasn't changed, is the only thing that they'll be asked to pay to go back to active current status.
and I'm with you, Dr. Drummer. When my career's done, I'm going to know it's done. I mean, I doubt that I'll flip-flop. It's possible, but I mean, we work hard. When I'm done, and I would probably just go into that delinquent. I mean, that would just be my choice. So, anyhow, thanks for the discussion. Anything else from board members? Dr. Dominguez? Mr. Dominguez? Sure.
No, just 2 quick comments. One, there are 537 people that are the envy of those who may consider retirement.
At the time of
service in
that
the future.
writing.
And so I was reading through the comments as well. I just found it education piece. So there is a licensee who thinks that the $100 being charged is going to the APTA, which, you know, is
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
That's certainly part of an existing PR campaign to kind of differentiate ourselves between our associate colleagues, association colleagues, both CPTA and APTA alike. So these aren't membership dues. These aren't fees that are benefiting, advocacy for the profession. Purely Physical Therapy Board of California regulation of the practice. Very good point.
You know, one other point now, that because your words of DMV and Automobile Club and, you know, the PT Board and the APTA, DMV has a P&O, Planned Non-Operation, right?
Correct.
It's
Very similar.
reduced from your regular registration fee. So I got a 93 Toyota Camry I'm trying to rehabilitate and still kind of hopefully get it on the road again. So that's how I see this. It's not the full 300.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, if I get back into the game, I have 5 years and it's likely worth my while to do this. Otherwise, like Dr. Drummer said, the next flight to Tahiti, probably not going to come back.
It's a very interesting simile, one that I can partake in wholly, being part of the automotive profession at some point in my career. There's an administrative burden at the Department of Motor Vehicles to keep track of those records. However slight it may be in perception to the public, it's there. If we don't process it per transaction and request, it's going to be absorbed by the larger costs, which are paid for by the rest of the licensing population's renewal fees. And so that's one of the other things that I would just say. A lot of diligence was, taken into account to try to determine what the appropriate fee would be for a kind of small population of folks through attrition who might be exiting the profession, but also kind of represent the administration of the board itself and the contribution of those costs. So.
And so with that discussion, any pushback at all or suggested edits for the proposed language to include in the reg package? That proposed language is what Brooke read for all of us. Any public comment? And do we have a motion?
We have a proposed motion on the end of page 68. And then we would just add the proposed amended responses.
Move the proposed language as written.
Second.
Just want to make sure we capture with
edits.
the edits made in the meeting today.
Thank you.
So we have a motion by Dr. Drummer as proposed with the proposed edits to the language, second by myself. Any further board discussion? Public comment? And a roll call vote, please.
Alicia Rename.
Aye.
Dale Armstrong.
Aye.
Jesus Dominguez.
Aye.
Daniel Drummer.
Aye.
Katarina Ellaby.
Aye.
Jonathan Irvin.
Aye.
Tanya McMillian.
Aye.
7-0, motion carried.
Thank you. Next steps for that?
Drafting the FSR, or the final statement of reasons, with a few kind of clarifying points that we've learned through this process, and then submitting it for final review to the Office of Administrative Law.
Again, our regs are moving.
They are retired status, theoretically could go into effect January 1. I think April 1 is probably more a reasonable timeline to look at.
Okay. And possibly language for
Potentially have all three
continuing.
effective April 1st.
That's true. The performance evaluation tool and coursework tool 6 didn't receive any adverse comments, so those packages were moving in the same direction as retired. All three of them potentially could go into effect April 1 or January 1st for that matter.
What was the word you used? Huzzah.
Huzzah.
Huzzah. And possibly continuing competency language in December, possibly.
Possibly.
Okay. Very well. Thank you all for that robust discussion. And agenda item number 17 is for public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any public comment? And we will call for this again tomorrow as well, if we don't have any now. And that brings us to the end of day 1, and we will recess. The time is 4:03, and hope to see everybody back here to begin at 9.
Are we intending to go to closed session?
Oh, yes.
You will be
sorry.
recessing in closed session.
So we're recessed after closed session. We do have some business to
Yeah.
take care of.
But we won't be returning
We
after
won't be
closed session
returning
today
by-
to
yeah.
recess.
Okay, thank you.